chips where you come from. We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of £70.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
My face. But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Talk, the home of common sense. A very big Sunday morning breakfast for you. I hope you've got an appetite. Not just a big coffee and a couple of rashers of bacon. Scrambled eggs, my preference. Poached are too fiddly. We have a political 3-course meal for you. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced plans to move asylum seekers from hotels to army barracks. Are you convinced, as the government look at an overhaul of the Human Rights Act and even have another look at our membership of the ECHR, is Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage, and will it work? And speaking of the Reform UK leader, a new threshold has been reached. I'll bring you exclusive details of a stunning new poll showing for the first time a full overall majority for a Farage-led government. But are they ready for power? Plus, an explosive headline in today's Mail on Sunday. If you're watching us on YouTube, take a look at this. This is going to divide opinion. And Peter Blexley is not happy, let me tell you. He's with me in just a moment. The headline is an absolute corker. Boris and Farage must unite to crush Labour. So, as Boris loyalist Nadine Dorries joins Reform UK, should Nigel Farage bring Boris Johnson into the Reform project to deliver a political revolution, or would that be Reform UK's biggest own goal? Boris to Reform, what do you think? 0344 499 1000. He's got his fans, he's got his detractors. Is he really a Conservative? Let's debate that And let's take your calls on that subject. 0344 499 1000. Boris to reform, what say you? Does he seal the deal or does he tear it up? And as the Reform UK conference concludes, we'll be joined live on the show by one of the most high-profile figures within the party, Sarah Pochin. Live at 8 a.m. on the show, another box office booking courtesy of Big Dean, the producer today, who, let me tell you, is coming in hot with quite the shortest shorts I've ever seen. I mean, folks, this is a family show. You do not want to know what I'm looking at the moment. I can see his religion, and I'm not lying. He's a man of deep faith. I might get him in because producer Dean was actually at the Reform UK conference, and he told me that he was doing interviews and fact-checking, right, with his ear to the ground. His ear was not to the ground, OK? No, his hand was on the pint glass, and he was glued to poor old Nigel Farage, followed him like a rash. It was borderline stalking. But the reason why we're talking about Reform UK, it is their conference, and this shocking new poll suggests that they will be our next government with a working majority. But are they ready for power? Also, when we'll speak to Sarah Pochin, how many more senior Conservatives will flock to Reform? I'll be asking Annunziata Rees-Mogg about that. She, of course, is part of one of the most high-profile Conservative-supporting families in the country. We have a Rees-Mogg, I think the cleverest, by the way, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, live at 9, and she's not pulling her punches. Plus, more on the Titanic deck chairs reshuffle and a special edition of Crime Watch, looking at the big crime stories of the week in the company of my first hour guest today, a true legend. I wish this guy still served in the front line of British policing. It is ex-Met Detective Peter Blexley. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Mr. Dolan.
Listen, we've got to start with a story that you're like Harry Kane, and I don't know who I am, but hopefully some kind of striker that occasionally scores the odd goal, because you passed me quite the most amazing pass. I know this is not Talk Sport, this is Talk Radio, but this is a tap-in for me. Mail on Sunday, Boris and Farage must unite to crush Labour. What say you?
Nigel Farage's centrepiece speech at the Reform conference this week said we are a party that will speak with one voice. A very, very important line if his ambitions to get elected as Prime Minister are to be achieved. This front page of the Mail is mischievous and smacks almost of not speaking with one voice, because personally I think that Boris Johnson has proven to be untrustworthy. We know that he's told pork pies on a monumental scale.
Well, you're an ex-copper, and you know a liar when you see one, and you know a crook when you see one. Would you put Boris in that category? I know he's not broken the law, but you can smell a sketchy character a mile off. Is he one of those?
He was fined for breaching COVID. OK, so that was breaching the law as it stood at the time. Now, he's toxic, in my opinion. His brand is so tarnished. Can you imagine Farage and Johnson on the same stage, sharing a platform? Surely there's not a platform big enough in the country to satisfy those two egos. So no, I think this is a mischievous headline. I think there may be some real Tory manoeuvrings going on here. I think Nadine Dorries, who's just recently joined Reform, if Reform are to go anywhere, she needs to be brought into line, and quickly, because this is a damaging and toxic headline.
Well, is she Boris Johnson's secret agent within Reform? Because we know that she's an arch Boris loyalist.
Then she's doing a very poor job of being a secret agent, isn't she? As somebody who worked undercover for over a decade, you don't get rumbled, OK? You don't break cover. You operate and you manoeuvre in your false persona. This is blatant, and it really needs to be stamped on very quickly.
Why is Boris a toxic figure? This is the guy that got us out of the European Union, and he kept Jeremy Corbyn out of office.
His dishonesty. And I make no qualms about saying that. He was proven to have lied, and not just on the odd occasion. That, therefore, is something I do not want in politicians. And moreover, dare I say it, listening to the British public as I do, and I'm out there every day talking to people because I love to natter.
Yeah, and you're becoming
honesty.
a bit of a celebrity now as well.
Well,
do you get stopped in the street? Are you Peter Blexley?
Dropper
of truth bombs?
There's an element of that, and people are lovely. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
And they want honesty from politicians. They want the truth from politicians, and what they really want is competence.
Also, here's the problematic aspect of this headline, is that it implies that Boris is somehow ideologically in tune with the reform project. Well, this is a man that, when he was in power, opened the floodgates to mass immigration with net legal migration of almost 1 million people a year. It was Boris that was responsible for an extra ramping up of our net zero commitments. It was Boris Johnson that oversaw the woke takeover of our public institutions under a Conservative government. And might I add, Peter Blexley, he was the Prime Minister responsible for the very illiberal and extraordinarily ruinous lockdowns, many people would argue of which were a massive mistake.
And what I would say about Boris Johnson, that as a Conservative Prime Minister, what did he conserve? What did he keep? What of things of importance and value to Britain did he maintain? I would say not very much at all.
Well, all I can think of, because if you set aside, it becomes a little bit like the Monty Python sketch, what did the Romans do for us apart from the sewers and the roads?
Yeah.
I will say that winning that election, when we faced the threat of a Jeremy Corbyn-led government, was obviously critical for our nation's survival. And getting us out of the European Union with an imperfect deal, but he got the job done, they are two major redeeming factors from, in my point of view, regarding his legacy. But overall, if you set that aside, I think he might have been the worst Prime Minister in 100 years. Because we had the Boris wave, we had net zero, and he bankrupted the country with COVID.
Let's face it, Jeremy Corbyn could have got any number of people elected as Prime Minister as an alternative.
Good point.
Because he was just so appalling. And of course, he's taken his lunatic left politics off to this new party.
Which is probably going to come back like a creepy ghost in a few years' time, isn't it?
Busted flush.
Do you think?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
We can only hope, can't we? Because
yes.
A resurgent sort of hard left party would be a big problem for the country.
With absolute confidence, we can say that will remain a mere carbuncle and nothing to be concerned about. But of course, people with that general election that Johnson did win, of course, with a sizable majority, they fell for his ruffled hair shtick.
Yeah.
They fell for it. The man who deliberately uses language the like of which we haven't heard before, all right, I speak for myself, just to keep us in our place.
Yeah.
Right?
All the highfalutin stuff.
Yeah,
all the
absolutely.
walking thesaurus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And people fell for it. Okay, you know, many people fall for fraudsters. And so that's kind of...
Like that posh crook in Fawlty Towers. Do you remember the guy, the Lord or whatever, came in and said, could you please take this suitcase? It contains very valuable items. And then it turns out he was a crook, and maybe Boris is a cut from the same cloth.
We're getting dangerously close to the dreadful epidemic of fraud that we've got in this country. We might talk about that later.
Yes, we will.
But anyway...
Let's do that in Crime Watch.
Yeah, but really, I think Johnson should keep himself away from mainstream politics. I'm sure his rampant ego is not going to allow him to do that for very long. But Nadine Dorries needs to be hauled into line by Farage if his ambitions are ever to be met.
Let me offer you the flip side, Peter Blexley, because you are nothing if not an open-minded man. Is the other way to look at this that Boris Johnson is one of the most high-profile figures in the country, in the world of politics and beyond? In fact, he's got cut through that goes beyond politics. If he and Farage were to unite, he could bring in the Conservative voters who don't much like the look of Reform UK.
It would hugely undermine Nigel Farage because he has repeatedly stated about his ambition to smash the Conservatives, not prop them up, not reinvent them, not get them back into power under some different flag. He said he wants to finish them off. And if he aligns himself alongside Johnson, that will be catastrophic for Farage, catastrophic for Reform, and they will never get elected into power.
Is Reform and is Nigel not in a mood now for coalition building? What is the point in the right being divided like that, in Farage wanting to smash the Tories, if it gives Keir Starmer another 5 years in power?
People voted the Tories out after 14 lamentable, hugely damaging years. The public of Britain do not want the Tories back, and the opinion polls bear me out on that. They want reform, it would appear, if we look at repeated polls putting reform in front.
Mm-hmm. OK, well, here's a question for you. Are Reform UK ready for power? Because a shock new poll demonstrates a Reform UK working majority if there were an election tomorrow. Of course, there won't be an election tomorrow. They've got 4 years, most likely, to get this sorted out. And that is the topic of today's Dolan Dispatch. Yes, the monologue is back. And that is appointment to listen at 9 a.m. Don't miss it. I'll be addressing the elephant in the room, which is, are Reform ready for power? But next, more front pages in the company of the brilliant Peter Blexley, and we're going to discuss Starmer's efforts to out Farage, Nigel Farage, on illegal immigration next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One of the most high-profile figures within the Reform UK movement, Sarah Pochin, live on the show at 8. Annunziata Rees-Mogg at 9 a.m. The Rees-Moggs are starting to desert the Conservative Party. Is that the beginning of the end? We'll get to all of that, plus my Dolan dispatch at 9 o'clock. Are Reform ready for government? But let's have a look at whether Labour are ready for government in the company of the former Met detective Peter Bleksley. And Peter, we've got the front page of the Sunday Telegraph here. First of all, a picture of Princess Catherine looking absolutely stunning. Some wild controversy about her new hairdo earlier in the week. Well, I think she looks tremendous. But far more importantly, PM to move migrants to army barracks. This is a story from Nick Gutteridge and Ben Riley-Smith at the Telegraph. Migrants in asylum seeker hotels will be moved into barracks on former military bases under plans to be unveiled within weeks. The new Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is set to announce the policy imminently after being instructed by Sir Keir Starmer to get a grip on the small boats crisis. Dozens of asylum hotels are to be closed after they became the focal points for nationwide protests against illegal immigration. Peter Bleksley, is Sir Keir Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage?
Well, he's desperately trying to cling to power. And I know that sounds ludicrous to say it 15 months or so into his premiership, but you only have to listen to the chants from the football fans at the England game last night to realise how widespread his unpopularity is.
Yes, they were calling out for Starmer is a and then W.
Yes, it's astonishing.
Rhymes with banker, but we won't go there.
Indeed, we won't touch that word. It's astonishing that in such a short space of time he has managed to make himself so manifestly unpopular amongst millions and millions of people. Ordinary, working, tax-paying, law-abiding, wonderful, lovely people. They detest him. And perfectly honest with you, I'm in that number.
And these are people that are not quick to anger and not prone to political activism, but it seems that this government is radicalising even the mild-mannered people that don't get involved in politics.
Or the moderate mainstream, as I call them. Others call them the silent majority.
Yes.
Those wonderful people that have been motivated by this appalling government to suddenly express their views. But this was a long time in the making, and it's not merely of Starmer's ineptitude that this stems from. This dates back as far as 1997 and the start of Tony Blair's political correctness kind of campaign.
Yeah.
Some of which was good because we expunged awful words from the lexicon of British language forever. Sure. Wonderful. That was good. But the growing mission creep of the shrinking of our freedom of speech, if you will, of the fact that you mustn't express your views, of the tentacles going into every corner of public life, the civil service, education, health, policing, which has led to the liberal, wokey, fluffy, intolerant kind of nonsense that stops people from speaking their mind politely and pleasantly. All of that. This is the pushback. This is the pushback moment. And I think that Nigel Farage is harnessing that to a large degree. Whether he can win the trust of all the disaffected, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I'm going to be asking you later in this hour whether Nigel can deliver, because it will take financial resources, for example, with the repatriation of foreign criminals, and it will take political will, and he'll have to overcome the blob. And indeed, for example, you know, the culture within policing, can that be changed without more structural reform? But before we get to that, let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Peter.
Yeah.
PM to move migrants to army barracks. I mean, on the face of it, a positive headline. What say you?
Yes, as long as it's accompanied by miles and miles of razor wire and some very capable Alsatians, I hope, to keep people. Look, they break the law. OK, let's ditch this language, if we may, of irregular migrants. Section 3 of the Immigration Act 1971 makes it a criminal offence to come to the UK without the right to remain, without leave to remain. It's a criminal offence. So you can bin all that fluffy language that the lunatic left and all those people
And the Guardian call them asylum seekers or refugees.
Yes.
Well, that's misinformation, isn't it?
Section 3 of the Immigration Act 1971. That's my standpoint on it. And I think that's really important. These people who are coming to the country in huge numbers on these dinghies, but let me say, while I'm on my high horse, this is the visceral, the visible and the very emotive side of illegal migration into this country. There is a far greater problem with the abuse of visas, for example. And do we know who's coming in vans, smuggled in vans and lorries and the such like, and through other methods? But the abuse of visas, that system, is perfectly illustrated by a very concerned woman who rang me this week. She works with homeless people. Okay, a very laudable thing to do to those who have fallen on hard times and need to repair their lives.
Sure.
A man who had come here from the subcontinent on a study visa, which he had overstayed, came into her office together with his wife and 2 children. Do you know what? Who weren't on the visa, who weren't entitled to come here, but mysteriously had. And so in he bowls to the office with wife and 2 kids saying, I'm homeless. His visa gives him no recourse to public funds, which this woman pointed out to him. You're homeless. You've got no recourse to public funds whatsoever. So there is nothing I can do for you. At which point he got up, walked out saying, well, then they're your problem, and left the wife and 2 kids in the office. They waited around, they wouldn't be moved, they wouldn't go away. So, of course, what happened? Children's Services got involved because there were 2 kids there.
Which is the
Social
deployment
services.
of enormous resources.
Yep.
And overcrowded, solutions already for kids that haven't got a roof over their heads. Absolutely shocking. Maybe jumping the queue in front of other families who are in trouble.
Undoubtedly, as this lady said to me, she said, and by close of play that day, they were swept away by the social services to be housed somewhere.
Wild.
She said, if a 25-year-old British lad comes into my office saying, you know what, life with my parents is intolerable, and he's a decent, hard-working person who wants a roof over their head, she cannot help him. He's been
and this is
huge
a shocking anecdote that you've heard, and yet it's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we've got 50,000 people supposedly that have crossed the channel in the last 12 months. So what about the figure that goes beyond that? The sort of people that are outstaying their visas, etc., manipulating the system. Could the real number be double that?
Oh, I'm sure it's way, way higher than that. Way higher than that. And of course, the government is beginning to acknowledge that by changing visa allowances, for example, by stopping dependents, the amount of dependents that has come here in recent years. But let's also think about the 40,000 that came the previous year, the 35,000 that came the year before, and I'm talking about the illegal migrants on boats.
Yeah.
Do we hear where they've gone to? Do we hear whether they've assimilated into the UK? Do we know if they're working, or have they just disappeared into the ether?
Well, here's the other problem with the army barracks is that, again, this is really just optics, that people go out of the illegal immigrants come out of the hotels, they go into an army barracks, that's fine. First of all, it still costs millions to get those army barracks ready to accommodate these folk, okay? So it's still taxpayers' money. It's not free, and it's land that's going to be, has a potential other use. Secondly, some of these army barracks are still near communities where people live.
Yep.
And the other issue is, will these folks be detained in the army barracks? Well, they won't, will they?
No, I'm sure they won't.
The razor wire, of which you are so, enamoured, is not going to feature in this policy.
No, it isn't. And so we'll close the hotels, right, to replace them with these camps. But actually, this again is all a smokescreen for a bigger problem coming to a neighbourhood near you, unless you live in the Cotswolds, for example, where I doubt there's going to be houses of multiple occupancy.
Yeah.
That's the next big problem coming down the road, because if there's 4, if there's 6, if there's 8, if there's 10 or more of these men parachuted into your neighbourhood, taken from the hotels and put into houses of multiple occupancy, the problems are going to be more widespread.
Could be even worse than the hotels, because at least with the hotels, they're in one place.
Yes.
So if you imagine a young British family living next door to a house of multiple occupancy, perhaps it's a husband and wife with a couple of young kids, and there are 8 men next door who have entered the country illegally, who have discarded their documentation and cell phones in the water as they cross the channel, and that's your next door neighbour, Peter.
Then we will see more civilian patrols coming together, like we've seen in Bournemouth in recent times, when the problem became so intolerable that the people took to the street themselves, formed themselves into a group and said, well, we're going to keep the streets safe because the police simply can't. or won't.
It's a shocker. Obviously, that's going to be the big messaging from the government this week is about the army barracks plan. There is the other issue, and I take your point about the visas and the whole thing is a wild scam, and we're being mugged off as a public. But the other issue, and I think no one is really talking about it enough, except perhaps Reform UK, the Tories aren't talking about it, Labour aren't, which is the supply of illegal immigration into the country, right? So that 50k, who cares where these folks are accommodated? That's almost a red herring. We don't want any of these people in the United Kingdom. And the number grows. I mean, across the course of this parliament, you're looking at 250,000 if that 50k figure stands, which it likely will. The issue is supply. How do we stop the boats, and can Reform stop the boats?
Oh, well, what happens is Sunak says we stop the boats, Starmer says we smash the gangs, and all the time we merely spread the illegals. That's the reality of it. There needs to be a political will. We see in the papers today that Starmer perhaps is considering looking at the European Convention on Human Rights and therefore, of course, the European Court on Human Rights. Will he have the spine to do that? Will the left of his party, who blocks the welfare reforms, allow any new legislation to go through party? Will Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, a man who I believe is so hugely damaging to this country, will he allow such reform?
Folks, he's coming in hot today. We have the brilliant Peter Bleksley. He is, of course, a former Met detective. A very, very busy 3.5 hours to come. Great to have your company on a Sunday morning. Get the kettle on, because after this, we're going to have a look at tomorrow's front pages, and there's some pretty explosive stuff in there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. The Sunday Times revealed after 24 years intelligence failure that forced UK to free 9/11 plotter. Scotland Yard was forced to release an alleged Saudi intelligence officer who provided financial backing and support to the 9/11 hijackers after the FBI failed to share crucial evidence. Ministers target rights reform to head off Farage. But will this work, and will it wash within the Labour movement? Sir Keir Starmer's new cabinet is prepared to overhaul human rights laws to tackle immigration. How will that go down with Tony Blair, who was, of course, behind the Human Rights Act in the first place? They may also look at the ECHR. Is it convincing? And is Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage? Exclusive, Harry's plan to cheer up the King. Let's have a look at this. This is Harry, of course. Allegations, suggestions that Prince Harry and King Charles may meet when Harry comes to the UK for his Well Child Awards. Is peace in the air? More on that shortly. And how about this in the Sunday Express? HMRC hotline fails to answer 4 million calls. Tax officials failing to collect billions of pounds for the Treasury have admitted they ignore millions of phone calls from businesses trying to pay what they owe. A staggering £46.8 billion every year is not being raked in by HMRC, enough to plug a black hole in the public finances and allow Rachel Reeves to balance the books without requiring further tax hikes. And Nigel Farage on the front page of the Daily Express. Farage, Britain needs Rufus the Bear. This, of course, is the emblem of the Reform UK project. Is Rufus the Bear going to be in number 10 in a couple of years' time? Will he replace the cat that's currently the occupant of number 10? What's the cat called at number 10? Larry. Thank you very much, Dave. Well done to our engineer, Dave. Larry the cat. Daily Star Sunday. Exclusive, Reform MP Lee Anderson's schools plan. Anthem and flags in the classroom. Kids will wave a union flag and sing God Save the King in every classroom every morning under a Reform UK government. That's the claim of MP Lee Anderson, who reckons youngsters need to be taught what it means to be British. So patriotism in the classroom. What say you? The Sun on Sunday go with a TV story. Queen Vic shock. Enders axe TV Jamie. EastEnders star Jamie Borthwick has been axed from the BBC soap after The Sun on Sunday revealed he used a disabled slur. The actor, who played Jay Brown since 2006, was suspended in June. BBC Studios said Jamie will not be returning to EastEnders. What else have we got? And of course, this is possibly the big political story of the day. The Mail on Sunday. Britain's new politics. Boris and Farage must unite to crush Labour. Now, we're debating all the big stories in the company of the former Met detective Peter Bleksley. And Peter, very concerning to read that it's possible that the country has hemorrhaged almost £50 billion a year in taxable income because HMRC don't answer the phone.
A good friend of mine was telling me about their experience with the HMRC phone lines last week. They have a £500 bill that they're looking to pay to HMRC, but they wanted to ring for some clarity. It's obviously a bit of an anomaly amongst a bigger bill that this person has been paying. Yeah. The 500 quid discrepancy, they feel that they want to pay it, so they're ringing up just to clarify. Can't get through. Repeatedly tries, can't get through. And here we have a story where businesses who want to pay their taxes, they want to put money into the coffers to help the nation, cannot get through on the phone. Now, it's over 50 years since we put a man on the moon, okay, as a human race. You'd think we'd be able to set up some kind of system where people would be able to answer the phone, wouldn't you? It's really not that big a problem, surely.
Definitely. And does it tell us that the public sector of this country, in a broad sense, is not fit for purpose?
It does in so many regards. And once again, I allude to the tentacles that have sunk themselves so deep into virtually every corner of public service. Once again, education, health, the civil service more broadly, policing in particular. I seem to hear so many tales of that. And it is when these people get a grip, and I call them the lanyard classes, many of them, the very intolerant ones. The worst examples are they wear their lanyards on the train on the way home, just to try and reinforce to mere punters like me how important they are.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, and these are the people, I think, that create such inertia among public services. Because really, how difficult must it be to put together a team of people that will answer the phone, people that know their job, know their tax regulations, can enable people and help them to pay their money in?
I agree with you. And Santander don't seem to struggle with answering the phone.
Well,
and, you know, Sky Broadband or whatever, the private sector, the customer service is much better. I mean, for example, if I call my bank, they say, look, you're third in line, but if you're busy, press, I don't know, number 2 on your phone and we'll call you back. And it's just very, very efficient. Meanwhile, try and get a dental appointment or booking a driving test or, you know,
reporting a crime.
Oh, well, good luck with that. It ain't going to happen, is it? So that's HMRC hotline fails to answer 4 million calls. This story, a showbiz story in The Sun on Sunday, Peter. EastEnders axe TV Jamie, disabled slur Borthwick gets boot. What happened to the good old days when you could make a remark, apologise and move on?
Well, clearly a man who's been in this show for nearly 20 years has found that his career has come grinding to a halt. You'll please forgive me, I'm not entirely sure what it was that he said, but it's clearly something that has derailed his career. And he looks to me to be quite a young man. He's only 31, so started off as a child actor. But once again, it echoes of BBC staff or people they employ not behaving perhaps as they should do. A young man, 31 years old, could his acting career be over? Could it be finished? Are we living in an intolerant age whereby perhaps he can't make an apology and then move on? We'll have to wait and see. My big concern with EastEnders, though, is that some people who watch it avidly think it's a template for life. And I would urge anybody just to remind themselves it's a soap opera. It's not actually a lesson in how to conduct your life.
No, and it shouldn't be used as social engineering or propaganda, which it certainly has been used in the past with some of the more woke storylines, including during the pandemic when one of the characters was castigated for being hesitant about getting vaccinated for COVID-19. Now, the bottom line is the vaccine was there if you wanted it or didn't want it, but the BBC, state-funded BBC, was using storylines to shame people that decided not to get the jab.
Yes, overreach, I would describe it as.
It's overreach. And a disabled jibe, I mean, clearly, you know, it was unfortunate language. We won't repeat what he said, but it wasn't the dreaded racism, which will, of course, cancel any career. This is a remark, you know, made in jest, and obviously a misjudgment on his part. This is a 19-year career that's ended, and as producer Dean pointed out, he won't get another part in a soap. Well, first of all, because of these headlines, and secondly, because when you're in a soap, you're very typecast, aren't you? So that could be career over.
Yes, and at the age of 31, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. At the age of 40, my policing career was over, regrettably, and I know what it's like to consider yourself on the scrap heap of life. It's not a very nice place to be, especially if you've no trade to fall back on, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
I couldn't go, you know, rewiring houses and the such like. And foolishly, I'd largely flunked my education. So an unfortunate place to be if you think you've
What happened? What would you? Are you able to give us the broad context of what happened there for you?
Yeah, well, I was medically retired because I had a catastrophic mental health breakdown.
Yeah.
I had to be very hurriedly parachuted into the witness protection program because my life was under threat, and then a report got lost that contained my real name multiple times. Got lost, ? Stolen. And so when all those factors came together, I couldn't live where I was living, so I had to abandon my home, abandon my identity, abandon the life that I lived and loved, and go into this hideout. 2 years of living there, continually kind of conspiracy theorising as to how all this happened, drinking too much, smoking too much. There was an air of inevitability about my catastrophic mental health breakdown, which was the precursor to the end of my policing career.
Yeah, absolutely devastating, and no support for you at that time, I would have thought, or precious little.
It was a long time ago, and of course mental health affairs in the police are still not dealt with as well as they should be, and there was no understanding or appreciation.
How did you get yourself out of that hole and rebuild your life, Peter?
Family. The love of my wife and my family and very loyal friends, a very small group of friends. In the run-up to that, I would have told you that I had dozens upon dozens of friends. What the whole episode taught me is I have a handful of friends, and they remain as loyal and as supportive today as they were back then.
Well, listen, I'm so glad to see you rise like a phoenix out of the ashes, and now one of the country's most compelling broadcasters and commentator on not just matters of policing but far beyond. Next up, we're going to have a look at Labour's Titanic deck chair reshuffle. Will it reboot Starmer's premiership?
two people in those really important jobs Keir Starmer's identified. The first is Siobhan Mahmood, who I've mentioned before, and then Pat McFadden, the government's utility player, taking on the Department for Work and Pensions. He's basically been told, you've got to fix the labour market, you've got to get people back into work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One of the most high-profile figures within the Reform UK movement is Sarah Pochin. She's got a majority of 6, but she could well be in a Reform-led cabinet based upon a new poll, which for the first time, this is a brand new threshold, a big new achievement for Reform, showing an overall majority if there were an election tomorrow. So Sarah Pochin live on the show at 8 a.m. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Suggestions in the Mail on Sunday that Boris and Nigel Farage could unite to crush Labour at the next election. Dave in Worcester says, Mark, no, with about 30 O's there. Please, no to Boris. He was bloody dreadful as PM. Mrs. Core from Northamptonshire says, Dear Mark, Boris joining Reform, absolutely not. He's a toxic man. Even Nadine Dorries was a mistake. Gary says, Boris for reform, absolutely not. His immigration wave added hundreds of thousands. Reform is against mass migration. Peter says, good morning, Mark. In my opinion, reform should steer well clear of Boris. He is not even a real Tory, let alone a reformer. He had his moments of glory. Now let's move on to people that we can believe in. It just goes on and on. Valerie, hello, Mark. No to Boris joining reform. He messed up Brexit. If he joins, myself and my husband will not vote for reform. That's Valerie. Enjoying your weekend early show, she says. Well, look, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm with you till 10 a.m. And I'm delighted to say I'm back next weekend as well, Saturday and Sunday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Great to have your company. By the way, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, one of the most high-profile families that support the Conservative Party, the Rees-Moggs, she is live at 9 o'clock, plus more great guests. But let's get back to the front pages. Peter Blexley. Obviously, the reshuffle was foisted upon Keir Starmer because of the departure of the Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister, Angela Rayner. Is this an opportunity for Starmer to reset the project? And do you think that this could be a turning point for the government and allow Starmer to get a grip on this ailing project?
Well, of course, his new Chief Secretary, Mr Jones, was out doing the media rounds, wasn't he, this weekend, saying that this reshuffle was always in the pipeline. It was just hurried along a little bit by the departure of the tax-dodging former Deputy Prime Minister. So be it. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I have to say, I think there must have been some kind of planning looking towards this, because some of the changes are quite widespread. For example, Yvette Cooper managing to fail upwards yet again by going to the Foreign Office. I mean, really, isn't it bizarre in politics? It's utterly bizarre. She was appalling as Home Secretary. The boats didn't, the gangs didn't get smashed. Yeah. The prison crisis got worse, in which, of course, Shabana Mahmood obviously is felt to have done well because she's got the promotion into Home Secretary. But going from Home Secretary to Foreign Secretary, it's like just bizarre. Politics rewards failure like no other sector, like no other aspect of life, I think. It's just truly,
well, that's
truly
right, because
baffling.
Foreign Secretary, if anything, is a promotion from Home Secretary, isn't it?
It must be,
one of the great positions of government. Mahmood moving to the Home Office, is that significant? She's considered to be on the right of the party, and possibly as a Muslim woman with an ethnic minority background, perhaps she can inflict and roll out the policies that Keir Starmer needs her to inflict without any compromise and without being called racist.
And a woman who I believe has said that Islam is the most important thing to her in her life. So be it.
And has been on pro-Palestine marches.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And many people, of course, are scratching their heads going, this is now our Home Secretary. Will she have the commitment, the drive, and sort of the ideological will to try and stop this very real problem? We'll have to wait and see. We'll give her a chance, of course. There are question marks. I think the problem is bigger. I think it runs deeper. When you look at what Nigel Farage has laid out as his plan for tackling this problem, should he ever get elected into number 10, it's clear and unequivocal in terms of ditching the European Convention on Human Rights, a matter that will be quite complex because it's woven into things like the Northern Ireland Agreement. So it's not going to be an easy thing to just dive in and strip out. It's going to require not only a political will, not only determination, but competence. That's what it's going to need. Bright, smart, intelligent people. And isn't that what we want from our politicians?
Well, it most definitely is. And of course, that's the million-dollar question regarding reform is, do they have those people? Do they have the infrastructure? Well, they don't even have candidates for next year's elections at the moment. So they've got their work cut out. Farage is talking about an election in 2027. Well, I think he needs to hope it's actually 2029 because he needs time to build a movement, do you not think?
I think so. An infrastructure.
Yeah.
Of bright, clever people. And whilst I often lament Blair's 1997 win and thereafter, what I do have to admit is, look, have a look at what his front bench was. And whether you like them or loathe them, people like Jack Straw,
Robin Cook,
David Blunkett, Robin Cook, how principled, the most principled of the lot, and Gordon Brown, those people, Margaret Beckett, these were towering intellects.
Yeah.
Really clever, smart people. And whilst there's much that I wish hadn't happened, I do have to, not even begrudgingly, admit they were bright people.
Indeed, it was just the broader project and the major sort of overhaul of our constitution, which is, I think, the worst legacy of New Labour, as well as the flood of migration from Eastern Europe.
Indeed.
Which was completely unnecessary and not warranted, but rolled out by Tony Blair, who wanted to become President of Europe, I think.
And that did so much damage to my mates who were chippies, sparks, bricklayers, plasterers and the such like. Their wages were completely undermined. At the time, they'd be on 150, 200 quid a day if they were very lucky. Suddenly, they've got Poles coming in, working for half the money that my mates were on. And of course, unscrupulous employers used it as an opportunity to suppress all their wages. So much so that some of them, here's a common refrain, left the country.
There you go. What does that tell you? What about the millionaires? 16,000 set to desert the country this year. I think that number will double next year, by the way. In the Mail on Sunday, top banker Starmer is destroying growth with more taxes. No Sugar Sherlock, Peter.
No, Mr. Ken Costa. He's 75 years old, is Mr. Costa, so I suspect he's got decades of experience in banking. He used to be the chairman of a multi-billion-pound asset management firm called Lazard. I think I pronounced that incorrectly, but there you go.
I think you got it right.
And he has been clear and unequivocal about what Starmer and Rachel Reeves are doing to the economy and therefore this country. And here I quote Mr. Costa. Starmer is behaving like an unhinged gardener, torching every last green shoot with his flamethrower. You have to allow wealth to be created before you can tax it. Rachel Reeves, are you listening? I fear not.
Indeed. Is King Charles listening to the concerns of Prince Harry, who's desperate to meet his dad when he comes to the UK for the Well Child Awards? Do you think that those two should kiss and make up?
I'm the proud father of 3 adult sons. The thought of me having a fallout with them, which would leave us not talking, breaks my heart just to even contemplate it, just to even think about it, because I love these boys so deeply. I want Charles and Harry to reunite. I want them to get back together. I want them to get over their differences, because a father and son relationship should be a close one, should be a loving one.
What about Harry's betrayal, the book, the podcast, the TV show? Can that be forgiven, Peter?
I think forgiveness is a wonderful thing. If you find it in your soul to forgive, it really can be an uplifting, wonderful, deeply satisfying thing to do.
But can Harry be trusted not to write another book and not to go off and do another TV show?
Possibly not, but then you need to choose your words very carefully. You need to handle him very carefully. But at the end of the day, Harry only has one father. His mother died a long time ago. It's his dad. I want to see these two fall into each other's arms. I don't know if royals do that, but I'm forever hugging and kissing my kids, even though they're grown up and got whiskers and all sorts of things there under
They're
their
probably
arms.
bigger than you now, aren't they?
Yes. Well, yeah, one is. So, yeah, fathers and sons. I want them to get on. Maybe I'm just an old, wistful kind of romantic sort of marshmallow, but fathers and sons, yeah.
Yeah, well, blood is thicker than water. The only other issue is that you've got the wife, Meghan Markle, who I don't think is the best influence on Harry, and that will be a concern for the palace. But life is short. It's worth remembering that King Charles is battling cancer. He won't be here forever, and I suppose that will weigh on both men's minds.
And I'm not being disrespectful to His Majesty. I'm not being disrespectful to Harry. But you know what? If I knew him, I'd say, come round my place. right? Neutral territory.
You could open a bottle of brandy or something.
Oh, definitely. I'd go to Waitrose perhaps instead of Tesco's.
Oh,
Push
there
the
you
boat
go.
out.
Of course.
I would say, look, come round to mine. Neutral territory. Have a clean start. Shake each other's hands, and let's get on. Because as you quite rightfully point out, we are only on this planet for the mere blink of an eye in the greater scheme of things.
Too right. I'm delighted to say that Peter Blexley stays with us for the next half an hour. We're going to have a look at some of the big crime stories of the week in Crime Watch. More front pages and this extraordinary new poll, which for the first time shows a working majority for a reform-led government. But are they ready? 0344 499 1000. And Boris to Reform UK, what do you think? Are they the dream team? Johnson and Farage, we'll debate that next.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like someone out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very happy Sunday morning to you. It is Mark Dolan here, and you are listening to Talk, the home of common sense. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced a plan to move asylum seekers from hotels to army barracks. And as the government look at an overhaul of the Human Rights Act and even our membership of the ECHR, is Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage? Is it convincing? Are you buying it? And will it work? Speaking of the Reform UK leader, a new threshold has been reached. I'll bring you exclusive details of a new poll showing for the first time ever a full overall majority for a Farage-led government. But are they ready? And an explosive headline in today's Mail on Sunday as Boris loyalist Nadine Dorries joins Reform UK. Should Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson team up to crush Labour and deliver a political revolution? Or would bringing Boris into the Reform fold be Reform's first big own goal? Bojo or Bono? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. And as the Reform UK conference concludes, we'll be joined live on the show by one of the most high-profile figures within the party, Sarah Pochin MP. She's live at 8 a.m. Will Reform really stop the boats within 2 weeks of entering office? Sarah Pochin at 8, don't miss it. And how many more senior Conservatives will flock to Reform UK? Suella Braverman, Liz Truss, Robert Jenrick? Do the Tories face a brain drain, and should Reform accept them? Are there too many Tories within Reform now? I'll be asking Annunciata Rees-Mogg. She's live at 9. Of course, the Rees-Moggs, one of the most well-known Conservative supporting families. And the Titanic deck chairs reshuffle continues apace. And a special edition of Crime Watch. All of that to come. It is Mark Dolan. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And to tackle the big stories of the day and have a look at tomorrow's front pages and today's, of course, now, I'm delighted to welcome former Met detective Peter Bleksley. And Peter, this is a story that's thrown a cat among the pigeons. The message board has melted here at Talk with the idea of Boris Johnson joining Reform UK. And it's a clear message from my viewers and listeners. No, no, no. What's your view?
I'm going to answer one of your questions that you posed just at the top of the hour when you said, would this be Reform's first own goal? It will be their first and last if they take Boris Johnson into the fold. It would be so catastrophic that would utterly derail any hopes, any ambitions that Nigel Farage has got.
Oh, wait a minute, this is the Heineken politician, Boris Johnson, reaches the parts others don't reach. He is an election-winning machine. He's got charisma, he's got profile. He was Prime Minister, he got Brexit done. Surely there's a way to accommodate him into the project where you can leverage his fame and his relative popularity. Doesn't Boris Johnson carry in his back pocket about 3 or 4 million Conservative votes?
He's a busted flush. He's had his time as London Mayor and as Prime Minister, most notably as Prime Minister, where his rampant dishonesty was exposed ruthlessly for all to see. People have had enough of that shtick. They're never going to fall for it again. They really won't. And if he goes in to the Reform fold, it will be catastrophic, and Nigel Farage can kiss goodbye any chances of getting the keys to number 10.
I mean, Boris Johnson does still have millions of supporters out there. I definitely think he's hemorrhaged support because of the Boris wave, the open borders, the net zero, the woke takeover of our public institutions, and, in my view, the COVID overreaction. But there are still Boris fans out there, and many won't forget that he kept Jeremy Corbyn out of power by winning in 2019, and that he got Brexit done. Surely the Brexit deal is enough for Reform to swallow some of his mistakes in office and accept him into the fold.
There are any number of politicians that could have kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10 Downing Street, any number of them.
Well, don't forget the Tories were toast really at that election. Their reputation was you know, we'd had Theresa May and more or less a hung parliament in 2017. And it was Boris that re-energised the movement. I mean, the bottom line is, isn't the idea of a political party to be a broad church? And isn't there space for someone like Boris within Reform?
No, there really isn't. I will not stop reiterating this because, in my opinion, his rampant dishonesty revealed a far greater malaise about the man. And I'm not even touching on his personal life. I'm strictly talking about him as a politician. He sat in front of the nation and told untruths. He was also exposed as being extremely autocratic with regards to the lockdowns and all that followed.
The enormous cost, the damage to society. Yeah.
And the allegations of the kind of chumocracy that allowed people to line their pockets when delivering PPE that wasn't fit for purpose and the such like. You know, there's a stench about him that people will not forget and cannot be blown away easily.
Of course, you do get the argument, don't you? You hear the argument that politics is showbiz for ugly people.
Yep.
Boris is box office. He is showbiz. When he speaks, people listen. Is there not a way of deploying some of his gifts in order to completely and unilaterally defeat this Labour government? Because I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves when we talk about a reform-led government, given the fact that the left could easily form a coalition between the current Labour Party, the Lib Dems, the Greens, who could keep a conservative right-wing party out of power for a generation. And at that point, isn't that the moment, Peter Blexley, when you swallow Boris Johnson, so to speak, but not literally?
I owe you for a huge favour because I've just remembered my passport expires next year, and the very thought of Greens, Lib Dems and Labour coming together to form some kind of government means I need to renew my passport so I can flee this country the day that ever happens. Please, no, never allow such lunacy. If we think this lamentable government are bad enough, imagine what they'd be like with those other fellow... well,
that's it. Well, you need to renew that passport, and you're going to flee Britain along with the other 16,000 millionaires. By the way, I confidently predict that number will double next year. And this is how wild the woke left are. There was an article by a woman called Caitlin Moran. Are you familiar with her work?
Yes,
of course. She writes for The Times. She's a columnist. She's obviously a very talented writer, but she's got some crazy ideas. And a few months ago, she wrote an article saying millionaires are leaving Britain. Good riddance is what she said. What these people don't understand is that when rich people leave, we're the ones that have to pay the taxes that they previously paid. And of course, the economic activity drops and the investment drops, and it's a race to the bottom. So that is a real concern. I've been very unsuccessful in trying to convince you that there may be a place for Boris in Reform UK. So here's the next question for you. Was it a mistake accepting Nadine Dorries, who is Boris Johnson's #1 cheerleader?
As an ex-detective, you may not be surprised to know that I need to create a timeline if I was in Reform, OK? Because this line of Nadine Dorries about Boris and Farage need to unite was given to the Daily Mail's podcast, a podcast conducted by Sarah Vine and Peter Hitchens. So I want to know, when was that podcast recorded? Was it recorded, for example, on Monday or Tuesday of last week? Did Nadine Dorries then decide to go over to Reform? I want a timeline. If that was the case, my carpeting of her, were I to be Nigel Farage, would be a lot milder than if she defected to Reform and then did this podcast. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, because the timeline would demonstrate her motivations and her actions.
Yes, it would indeed, and it would be really, really important. If she has done this podcast after informing Reform that she's going to join them, after letting Nigel Farage know that she's going to join them, then this is nothing other than mischief-making. And let's just remember what Nigel Farage said in his landmark speech to conference this week. This is a party that speaks with one voice. Nadine Dorries would be in big, big trouble with me if I led Reform.
So is the growing Toryfication, if you like, of Reform UK a problem for the project?
Of course it is, because the Tories got booted out and handed a huge majority to the lamentable Starmer, and that was a protest vote, and look how big a protest vote that was.
Even if the Tories' brand is now in the toilet, which it most certainly is, at the next election they will still accrue a few million votes. Reform need those votes to secure power, surely, and isn't that the point about the increasing number of Tories joining the Reform fold in order to grow that coalition?
There's room for some Tories, of course. They're already in there, and I see early this morning, another councillor going from Tory to Reform. But there is a huge danger that Reform loses its identity if it gets swamped by former Tories. Reform does have a clear and distinct identity, created, of course, and fronted by Nigel Farage. But if it just becomes Conservative light, for example, then it's going to be in deep, deep trouble.
Well, I think you're right, because I was listening to Sarah Pochin's speech at Reform UK conference this weekend. She's on the show live at 8 a.m, and she did not sound like a Conservative MP. She talked about the invasion in this country, the safety of women and children. It was a very, very visceral and politically uncompromising speech. You could argue it was also quite un-PC as well. She made jokes about burqas. So she's definitely not woke, and she doesn't sound like one of the sort of new influx of Tories. She might have been, back in the day, more of a Norman Tebbit sort of politician who have deserted the Tory fold. So that is a fair point. I suppose it's a case-by-case basis in terms of which Tories Farage allows into the party. Should he accept, for example, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman?
Well, Suella Braverman got herself in a lot of hot water, didn't she? And she was hugely unpopular amongst some, and she was very easy for the left to take a pop at, which might make her even more suitable for Reform.
Yeah.
But
she's been quite politically courageous, I think. I mean, she was the politician that broke the mould with the invasion language a couple of years ago, which went down like a lead balloon within Conservative ranks. I mean, this is the risk that Reform UK have, is that if they accept too many Tories and you get the Tory party light, half of the Conservative backbenchers wouldn't want to leave the ECHR, which is why Kemi Badenoch hasn't announced any policies so far, is because anything that she wanted to do wouldn't be accepted within her own ranks.
As Margaret Thatcher may have described them as wets.
Yeah.
And the Reform Party does not need Tory wets defecting to its ranks.
So Suella Braverman, is that a yes or a no for you in Reform? I'm making you the de facto party chairman.
I think she'd be a very popular addition.
Right.
To
so
the
she comes in.
Reform ranks.
Boris no, Braverman to Braverman's in, Boris out.
Yeah.
Liz Truss?
Oh no.
Really?
No.
What about that tax-cutting budget? She was very brave.
No.
She wanted to put a tiger in the tank.
Really, just leave Truss to her own lunacy, whatever it is she's getting up to. You know, just leave her be. And I know she wants to stay relevant and she likes to hear her voice mentioned and all of that. But wouldn't it be a gift to people on the left of the political spectrum if Liz Truss joined Reform? The left would be able to say, look at Reform, look who they've got, look at their desperation. They will take anybody and anyone.
Do you think Nigel Farage is too keen to accept these figures into the party because of his desire to punish the Tories and to destroy them?
I think he's got to be extremely careful. He's almost at a cusp now, because the polls are repeatedly saying Reform in front, Reform in front. If this were reflected in a general election, there would be a Reform majority government, which would be astonishing and the most amazing thing to have happened in British politics for many, many a decade. But he's got to be very careful. This political juggernaut could be thrown off course if he starts taking on board disaffected Tory wets.
OK, and we've no to Truss, yes to Braverman, no to Boris, and the final one, Robert Jenrick. Should he be accepted into Reform UK's project? Because I predicted many months ago that he will leap and he will join Reform before the next election?
I think Robert Jenrick is very busy trying to derail Kemi Badenoch at the moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? A bit of a power struggle. So he's got his eye on the big prize, which is the Tory leadership.
Well, it's not quite such a big prize these days, is it? Let's be honest.
It's diminishing returns. Lots more to come. We've got more front pages and the big crime stories of the week. All of that is next.
But look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Boris Johnson to join Reform UK? No, says Gary in Bolden. His immigration wave added hundreds of thousands. Reform is against mass migration. Peter, good morning, Mark. In my opinion, Reform should steer well clear of Boris. He's not even a real Tory. This from Valerie. Hello, Mark. No to Boris joining Reform. He messed up Brexit. If he joins, myself and my husband will not vote for Reform. Christina, hi Mark. Yes, Reform UK will be ready for power. They will make it so. Starmer can try every trick possible. People can see right through that. Maggie in London says, good morning. Nigel does not need slippery Boris back. He'll get there with his party on their own merit. And Barry, if Starmer stopped the boats tomorrow, he will still lose the election. He's been found out he and his government are useless. We'll be discussing that later in the show. Of course, a big front page story in the Sunday Telegraph. The Prime Minister to move migrants to army barracks and potentially have a look at the details of the Human Rights Act and the ECHR. So is Starmer shifting? Is he serious about stopping the boats? Is he trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage? Are you convinced? Will it work? 0344 499 1000. I also really want your calls on Boris to reform. Now, yes, he's a divisive figure. Yes, he presided over open borders, net zero zealotry, the woke takeover of our public institutions, and the illiberal and ruinous lockdowns. But he's a high-profile figure. He's well known. He still carries a couple of million Tory votes in his back pocket. Should Farage consider bringing him into the fold? More of your calls and texts in just a moment. But it's time now for this. There you go. Well done, Engineer Dave. That is our jingle for Crime Watch, in which we're going to have a look at the big crime stories of the week. And Peter Bleksley, a much-loved comedy writer, the Father Ted creator Graham Linehan, arrested by 5 armed cops at Heathrow Airport for some remarks about trans people. Your reaction?
Overreach and overkill. 2 deeply troubling things that really sum up the state of British policing as we speak. And on this very note about these social media posts which are leading to people's arrests, I would urge anybody who lays their hands on a copy of The Telegraph to look at page 9 today, because there's another deeply troubling story where a former police superintendent got a visit from the police over postings on X. She, as if this is a crime now, dead named somebody. So somebody who had transitioned from a man to a woman, she referred to them by their male name that they were given at birth. And the police apparently are not prosecuting her, but they came to her house. This is not police work. This is not what Robert Peel had in mind nearly 200 years ago. And yes, of course there wasn't social media then. But even so, his 9 Peelian principles that established the bedrock of policing need to be re-engaged with by the police and simply not ignored. They're very important. Any viewer or listener can find them online. Just Google the Peelian principles or Robert Peel's principles. That's what policing's about. That's what it should be, not 5 armed officers arresting Mr. Linehan at Heathrow.
What should be the threshold by which you are arrested for something you've written on the internet? What have you got to say or write that's so bad you get arrested? I mean, don't say it, Peter.
Yeah, of course.
What would it be?
When it has the likelihood, and that has to be a high threshold, a high likelihood of spilling over into the real world. For example, if you say to somebody, fill up a jerry can with petrol, walk down the road, pour it through somebody's front letterbox and ignite it, that, I think, is a clear example, almost an instruction to somebody to go and commit a very serious crime.
Is that not the Lucy Connolly tweet?
No, what I said there is rather different and a bit more precise in terms of it's more an instruction than an emotive response.
Yeah. She said, burn these hotels down if you want to, for all I care.
For all I care. And it was clearly wrong what she said, and I'm never going to defend what she said. But of course, a 31-month jail term was massively disproportionate. It was wrong. It was fundamentally
Should she have received any censure whatsoever?
I think if Lucy Connolly had pleaded not guilty and had a really professional defence team that had sharp teeth and bright minds, the outcome may have been completely different. At that time, I think she was bullied, coerced, forced into a guilty plea. I so wish she'd pleaded not guilty, and as we used to say in policing terms, given it a run.
Yeah, of course. So your threshold, your criterion for which one would be arrested for a posting on social media would be an instruction to others to break the law, essentially.
An instruction that also actually plays out.
So it would be something like, we're going to meet at 27 Acacia Avenue.
Of course.
And we're going to I want to get 100 people together, and we're going to walk down the road, and we're going to find this group of people, and we're going to attack them.
And we're going to batter the granny out of them.
So almost like a WhatsApp message or a Telegram message, where a plan is essentially being orchestrated through social media.
Yes.
Because that's not free speech. That is, what would you call that in policing terms?
It's a conspiracy to commit a crime.
Right.
It's a conspiracy.
Right.
It's when that there is that real potential and that likelihood of it occurring in the real world consequences. And I've just come up with that. I think that's a pretty good line. If it has real world consequences. That's where I'd set the bar.
Indeed. Well, Graham Linehan joked that if a trans woman, which is a biological male identifying as female, enters a female space, his argument is that that's a violent and abusive act, and if you're worried and you feel scared, then you should punch them in the nether region. Is just not the language of punching someone in the nether region already some kind of incitement? Could that not have real world consequences if a trans person is punched in the ghoulies?
If all else fails was the precursor, and he's talking about reporting them to the police or reporting them to the shop and whatever it was. If all else fails, punch them in the nuts, I think it was, wasn't it? All right, daft and stupid, but are people really going to rush out onto the streets and start confronting trans people in female spaces? Are there that many trans people? How likely is it to happen? How many people will encounter a trans person in a female space today? Not very many, I would argue. Who will call the police? Who will mention it to the store, for example? And so who's actually then going to punch them in the nuts? I don't see that threshold being met of the real world consequences.
Peter, before you go, President Donald Trump is currently enjoying his highest approval ratings of his presidency. He's now tracking a 55% approval rating according to the latest poll. And that's quite something, considering that he's been in for a few months, and normally when the honeymoon's over you become almost immediately unpopular. But he's riding high in the polls. So here's a question. Is Nigel Farage potentially Britain's Donald Trump, and should he aspire to be?
In many regards, I think he should, and he's actually laid his stall out quite clearly with regards to what he would do around illegal immigration. He's made that perfectly clear, and there are echoes of Trump in what he said there.
Who has successfully closed the border.
Yes, indeed.
With people, a lot of people don't realise this, but upwards of 12 million people entered America illegally over the last 4 years, and he's got those numbers down to a few hundred a month now.
Yeah, astonishing figures, and he has to be congratulated on doing that. He got elected on a platform to do that. But whilst we're talking about Donald Trump, and if we think that things are bad over here, just imagine what this world would be like if Kamala Harris had won that election. Can you imagine?
You sent a shiver down my spine on a Sunday morning. It was pretty wild stuff. She was asked about how she would tackle inflation in the run-up to the election, and her answer was that her parents had the kind of house that had a lawn in the front, and people would mow their lawns. That was her answer. I think they'd been listening to Keir Starmer's advisors with the whole "my father was a toolmaker" thing. Well, she's a tool, and luckily not in government in America. Indeed. But we do have a rather egregious government that are running the country, but we'll debate the reshuffle with voices from the left and the right in the next hour. Don't forget, one of the most high-profile figures within the Reform UK movement, Sarah Pochin, live at 8 a.m. Peter Blexley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Keep dropping those truth bombs. Remain attached to Common Sense, as you always do here on the Home of Common Sense Talk. Folks, next up, big news for Reform. A major threshold has been achieved. A new poll, for the first time, shows Nigel Farage's political party forming an overall majority if there were an election tomorrow. Can they sustain this? Can they grow their support? And are they ready for government? That's next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Our big story of the day, and it's courtesy of the Mail on Sunday. Boris and Farage must unite to crush Labour, says Nadine Dorries, Reform UK's latest recruit from the Tory party. Well, you're not happy about that. Peter has written in, hello again. Mark, my main concern about Nadine Dorries joining Reform was her strong links to Boris Johnson. No way should Reform be seen to have anything to do with Boris. After Starmer, he was probably the worst PM in my lifetime. I want to be rid of politicians who have ruined this country over the last 25 years. Reform will be ready when the time comes, have no doubt. Keep those messages coming in. 03444991000. Book your place on the show. We'll get your calls on air very shortly. But first, a big new development. A new threshold has been achieved on the part of Reform UK, which is a new poll suggesting that they could achieve an overall majority, a working majority, if there were an election tomorrow. Let's get reaction from Julian Galley, who is Head of Research at Merlin Strategy. Good morning, Julian.
Morning, Mark.
What do the numbers tell us? Tell us about this latest poll.
So I believe it's a forecast from the Telegraph using the average polling results that Reform are achieving. And it shows that at this moment in time, if there was an election held today, tomorrow, Reform are on course to win a majority. And that's over the polls that show that they have a 10-point lead over Labour. They're averaging about what Labour got in the last election, with Labour actually averaging significantly worse than Conservatives, who were in second place, got in the previous one.
And do we know about sort of what ballpark figure of a majority they'd be working with if there were an election tomorrow? Are we in the sort of, you know, below 20 sort of figure?
Yeah, we are. So at this point, it looks like it'll be 331 seats. So it would be a very narrow majority. Actually, looking at some other polls from other pollsters, it's a slightly higher majority. So those figures still vary, and it's all very tight. So we'll see what they get. And obviously, with 31%, and it depends how big a role tactical voting will play, not just from the left and whether progressive parties will come back to Labour, but actually will Conservative voters leave the Conservative Party to vote for Reform if they know Reform are going to be the party that will win the election?
Well, of course, that's the debate we've been having about Boris Johnson. He's quite a divisive figure, and many on the right consider him not to be a true Conservative. But if he could represent a couple of million extra votes for Reform UK, then possibly that might bear that might sort of be on Nigel Farage's mind in terms of recruiting him to the fold. So, tight majority, that's quite clear. Can they grow that support further, or have they hit a glass ceiling, do you think?
So, all the indications suggest that they could grow that support significantly further. Some polling from More in Common suggested 42% of the population would consider voting Reform. So, that's another 10 points that they could potentially gain to their average. I think we'll also could see Labour lose more support. So they're on about 20% averaging, but that could drop further. And we could also see more Conservatives go to Reform as it becomes more clear that the Conservative Party are not fighting for government.
Have the Conservatives ceased to be an electoral threat to Reform UK based on these figures?
Well, it appears to be that way. These figures and polling has shown that in an election, the Conservatives would be all but wiped out. It's quite likely that they would get less than 50 seats, probably less than 25 seats. So they're not a threat at this moment in time, and the first past the post system means that their support will be very low across seats, and that they could be left with very, very few MPs.
So this idea that the divided right could gift Keir Starmer another 5 years is starting to look unlikely.
It does look that way, and actually also the divided left looks like a much bigger problem for Labour, because the Progressives, the Green Party, Corbyn's new party, the Liberal Democrats, all of those parties have a potential to poll quite well, and all of their voters, from what we've been seeing in their polling, have a very negative view of Keir Starmer. So it's actually unlikely that they can be squeezed back to Labour and that they'll tactically vote against Reform.
Are there any barriers, Julian, to further growth in the polls for Reform UK?
There are, and a big message that Labour have been using is that Farage would privatise the NHS. We've done some polling, and it shows that the public are almost equally split on whether or not they think the NHS, that Farage wants to privatise the NHS. However, what we have seen is that people believe the NHS needs reform, and actually voters would prioritise reforming the NHS over increasing funding to the NHS. So there is a message that reform could potentially tap into, but when we've done focus groups, like we've done focus groups in Runcorn and Helsby, which recently elected Sarah Pochin, even reform voters were very concerned about what their plans for the NHS is, and it's clearly something that reform will need to tackle.
Could reform, support for reform, be higher than the polls are showing based upon the shy reform supporters, people that will vote for Farage but won't tell somebody in the street?
I think that's definitely a likely possibility, actually. When we look at the local elections, Reform's vote share outperformed predictions and outperformed polling at the time. And it's not just a shy voter, which I think does exist, but it's also about whether polls are picking up enough disengaged voters who might not normally vote, might not vote at elections previously, but will just vote this time because Farage can speak to those voters. And we saw it with Brexit and the Vote Leave campaign, the ability to speak to voters who are sort of not usual media consumers, not usually engaged in politics, but they know who Farage is, they know what he stands for, and they're probably quite frustrated by immigration.
Will the next election be one of the hardest for pollsters to call?
That could well be the case, I think so, and it's about a very new party, well, not new, but in Reform, we haven't got expectations about what seats they can win historically.
Yeah.
It's also about the Gaza independence, which was not picked up by pollsters last time, and it's about if there is a split left, a split right, what effects that will have with first past the post. We could see a lot of seats being won on a very low margin, with the winning candidate getting less than 30% in several seats.
Just a few months ago, Reform UK were very enthusiastic about changing the electoral system to proportional representation, given that Reform previously were a smaller but popular party that would be punished by first past the post, which of course they were in July of last year, winning just a handful of seats, but achieving more votes than the Liberal Democrats, who have in the ballpark figure of around 60. So has first past the post, has that gone from being a problem for Reform to an advantage?
It certainly looks that way. So the Telegraph polling suggests they would get more than 50% of the seats with just 30% of the polling. And actually every percentage they get beyond that, that could transfer to many more seats. And especially with a divided left, if Labour continue losing support, they could win a very solid majority with just 35–40% of the vote.
How much support do you think a breakaway left-wing party could achieve at the next election under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn?
So I personally think the Green Party will be a bigger threat to Labour because they've got the establishment organisation. But a Corbyn party, it looks like about 15% could consider voting for Corbyn. A lot of Labour voters have a positive view of Corbyn. About one in three Labour voters believe Corbyn represents the change the country needs. So especially as Labour are quite split on social issues, on immigration, we can see their voters split into two ways, where a lot of the disengaged Labour voters in the Red Wall go to Reform, but also a lot more of the progressive Labour voters in cities, in more urban areas, end up going to the Greens or Corbyn Party or the Gaza Independence.
Can Reform UK now safely ignore the Conservatives and put paid to the idea of an electoral pact, a coalition, any kind of partnership?
I think there's a lot of Conservative vote that they can still squeeze, because Conservatives are still averaging on about 16–17% of the vote.
Which is not nothing.
It's not nothing, and actually there's an opportunity for Labour for Reform to really put a knife into the Conservatives and take them down into single digits. So they absolutely shouldn't ignore Conservatives and should keep fighting against them. But it looks to voters' minds, voters believe that Reform are setting the political agenda. They view Reform as the opposition party much more so than the Conservatives because of that. So I think they're doing a good job of seeing away the Conservatives.
Are there a good number of former Conservative voters that are fed up with the Tories and won't vote for them again, but who don't much like the look of Reform? And where will they go?
I think there are. There are some who might find Farage and Reform slightly extremist. There might be some who have been voting Conservative for economic reasons rather than immigration, social reasons. So they could stick with Conservatives even if they are fed up. They could also tactically vote against Farage if they see that way. And that could end up having Conservatives going to Liberal Democrats or to Labour. And it does show the difficult position the Conservatives are in because their voters are quite split between those who will go to Reform, those who will go to Liberal Democrats, and actually any leader of the Conservatives need to keep those groups together.
Julian, thank you so much for your first-rate analysis of current political polling. Julian Galley is Head of Research at Merlin Strategy. Next up, is Sir Keir Starmer about to win back the support of Britain's farmers, having just fired his farming minister? Is he going to make amends? I'll be asking a farmer next.
Look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
In just 10 minutes' time, live on the show, one of the most high-profile figures within the Reform UK movement, Sarah Pochin. I'll be asking Can Nigel Farage stop the boats within 2 weeks of achieving power? Sarah Pochin live on the show, fresh from her conference speech in 10 minutes' time. Dave, have we got time for a couple of voice notes? Because your opinions are all that matter to me. And how about this from Sir Keir Starmer, Sunday Telegraph, PM to move migrants to army barracks. This is Hev with their reaction.
Good morning, gents. Yes, Hev in Kent here. And as far as army barracks are concerned, I mean, do you remember when they did that in Folkestone? And they opened up the barracks, they offered food, they gave them beds, they gave them everything. And what did they do? They trashed the damn place, threw food everywhere, furniture everywhere. And then they took photographs, and the photographs went to the media, and then the media were saying, oh no, look at the state of this place, you know, you can't house people here. And then they set light to it. You know, so something's got to give. It really has got to give. And you had all these people going, oh, you can't house them there. Well, they're the ones that trashed it.
Powerful words. The issue we've also got, Hev, there's a huge debate about where illegal immigrants should be accommodated, and clearly the hotels are a complete disaster, really bad for the community, for the local economy, and a health and safety risk to the locals. But the issue is that they're not going to be detained in these army barracks. They're still free to walk, they'll have pocket money, and there are people that live near army barracks. What we've really got to do is tackle supply. How do we actually stop the boats? And like I said, I'll be asking Sarah Pochin from Reform whether that's possible and how in the next hour. But Sir Keir Starmer, in an effort to reboot his premiership, has of course parted company with his Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. It has provoked a reshuffle, which the Labour Party have told us was already in the works. And one of the big scalps was the farming minister, who has moved on in the context of the tax raid on farmers. Can Keir Starmer, can he rebuild his relationship with Britain's farmers? Let's speak to a farmer who is Anna Longthorpe, who joins me now. Hi, Anna.
Morning, Mark.
Great to have you on the show. I'm sure you're very busy. We'll keep it brief, but can I just ask you whether you're hopeful that Keir Starmer could build bridges with the farming community in this country?
Well, you know, you'll have heard a lot of people saying that it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but the problem is we've got another 3.5 years of the Titanic sinking.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's be optimistic. For the last year, well, since Labour took power, it's been very clear that there's been two people running this country. I don't think it matters who's been in farming minister. I don't think it matters who's been in what department, to be honest, because it's very clear that Reeves and Starmer are the only people that hold any weight in there. I just hope that they use this as an opportunity to start listening, not just to the people, but to their ministers, because I'm sure Steve Reed's fed up of taking all the flack, and Daniel Zeichner are like taking all the flack from the farmers. Reeves has refused to meet farmers for over a year since the budget, and it's very clear why she's refused to meet farmers, because she full well knows that her policy is wrong. So yeah, I really hope that they use this as an opportunity to start listening to the ministers, and the ministers listening to the sectors that they're supposed to represent.
Do you hold out any hope, Anna, that the government will reverse their inheritance tax rate on farmers?
I don't think they will. There's been too many U-turns now, and you know, I would say a U-turn is a good thing if it shows that they're listening to the people. Yeah. It's not cowardly, it's not weak, it's a good thing, it shows democracy. But no, I don't think they'll reverse it. I think the best chance that we've got is that they listen to the farming sector and they tweak it. You know, the NFU have put, you know, various versions on the table that will raise more money for the government. So yeah, but at the same time, I think it needs to look like it comes from Labour, like it's their idea. So yeah, I hope they start listening to Dan Needle to look at the Syntax report, listen to the experts, listen to farmers, and yeah, just do the tweaks that most importantly saves those very vulnerable people that can't plan their way around this.
Most definitely. Well, look, I think that hopefully, you know, you'll keep speaking about this because you're speaking in such a compelling and articulate way, Anna, this morning on Talk to our many listeners and viewers. Could you convey to those watching and listening just how devastating the inheritance tax rate has been on farmers, and not just wealthy landowners, which is what the argument for this tax rate is all about?
So the average family farm is around 200 acres, and you know this inheritance tax, because farmers are what we you keep hearing it, we're cash poor, we're asset rich, and we just don't make the return. We don't have the capital, the money to pay for this inheritance tax. So with every generation, the farmers are going to have to sell off assets in order to pay the inheritance tax. And once you start selling off your assets, any business person will know that you're done. You can't live off your assets. And you know who's going to produce the food once all the farmers are gone?
And you need a volume of land in order to produce a volume of food. And if you start selling land to keep paying this inheritance tax bill, well, then your whole business model shrinks and it's game over.
Exactly, and it's not just the land. You'll see, people say about farmers driving around in these big fancy tractors, but you need those big tractors to do the work on the land, to pull the heavy equipment, to make it all. We've invested in order to become as efficient as we can be, and we need that expensive kit to do that. But the more we sell off, the less efficient we become, and then the business is just completely unviable.
Even the multi-millionaire farmer Jeremy Clarkson has demonstrated on his show Clarkson's Farm what a struggle it is to be a farmer and how devastating it is, what an emotional roller coaster. Can you tell me about morale among farmers that you know, and also what you're going through, Anna, at the moment?
Morale's really low. We just can't see where we're going. Farmers have to plan years and years in advance, and it's hard enough with not being able to predict the weather, not knowing what price we're going to get for our products at the end of the day, not knowing what global disasters is going to be that's going to affect our costs of production. The one thing that we need to be able to rely on is government policy, but we can't even rely on that now. We've got a government that's actively attacking farmers. That previous governments haven't done us much, many favours, but they've not actively attacked us in the way that this government is.
Would you be persuaded by the argument that the country's broke, that there's a big black hole as a result of the Tories, and that the money's got to come from somewhere?
I don't. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer keep saying they've had to make difficult decisions, that big difficult decisions. The problem is they keep making the wrong decisions. We all have to make decisions in life. Things stop if we don't keep making those decisions. But just listen to the people, listen to the sectors, and make the right decisions.
I'm truly horrified by the treatment of farmers under this new administration. I think it's egregious, cruel, wicked, stupid and wrong. I truly despair. And one of the reasons why I despair, Anna, is because I think that the sort of media and political class don't understand how hard it is already to make money as a farmer, and what a hard life it is. Can you just give me a flavour of what farmers go through on a daily basis to do their work and to keep the lights on?
Well, every day is different, whether you're this is a thing that a lot of people don't understand. Farming's not just about driving up and down a tractor all day. You've got different sectors within farming. So you've got pig farming, which I am, dairy, cattle, sheep, poultry, arable, horti. There's just so many different sectors, and for a government to try and just treat us all with a broad brush just doesn't work.
And you get floods, you get rain showers, you get droughts, animals get sick. Equipment gets stolen because there's rural crime. It is a blitzkrieg of problems that farmers face on a daily basis, isn't it, without being too dramatic?
It is, yeah, and the cycle is very cyclical. So pig farmers, it's a very boom and bust sector because we're dictated to what price we're going to receive, and global shocks really affect cost of production. The pig sector's been through a really rocky time, and we were just, the last couple of years, we've been in profit, and we were just sort of starting to get a bit of confidence. And then, boom, the Labour government came into power and absolutely just destroyed any confidence that any farmer's got.
All I can say, Anna, is I'm humbled to speak to you. I'm genuinely horrified by what the farming community are going through in this country. You provide our food, and we're talking about businesses that have been around for generations, and when they're gone, they're gone. Anna, keep up the amazing work. My viewers and listeners salute you, and perhaps we should pick up that conversation again in the near future. Anna Longthorpe there, farmer. Honestly, I'm happy to make tough decisions and pay more tax for this, that and the other, but to attack the people that work so hard in all weathers to keep us fed is so wrong. Next up, Sarah Pochin, Reform UK. Can Farage stop the boats in 2 weeks?
been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Mark Dolan, and a very happy Sunday morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and a big Sunday morning breakfast lined up. Rashers of bacon, pork sausages from those excellent farmers that have been clobbered by Labour. We support the farmers here. And a big menu of topics await. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced a plan to move asylum seekers from hotels to army barracks. And as the government look at an overhaul of the Human Rights Act and possibly even our membership of the ECHR, is Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage? Are you convinced? Does that wash with you? And will it work? And an explosive headline on the front page of today's Mail on Sunday as Boris loyalist Nadine Dorries joins Reform UK. Should Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson team up to crush Labour and deliver a political revolution, or would this be Reform's first and biggest own goal? Boris to Reform, what say you? 0344 499 1000. And how many more senior Conservatives will flock to the Reform project, I'll be asking. Annunciata Rees-Mogg, live at 9. Plus more reaction to the Titanic deck chairs reshuffle. And your calls 0344 499 1000. A very, very big 2 hours to come. This is Talk. This is the home of common sense. Well, there you go, folks. It's been a very busy weekend. I make no apologies for discussing Reform UK at such great length this weekend. Firstly, because it's their party conference, and secondly, because a new poll published in the last 24 hours suggests that Reform UK would form an overall majority if there were a general election tomorrow. So let's get reaction now from a Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby, one of the most high-profile figures within the reform movement. Sarah Pochin. Sarah, welcome to Talk.
Good morning, Mark. Lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I just enjoyed your speech earlier today on my way in. Very powerful stuff. And Reform very much framing themselves as the change candidate for the British people.
Look, you know, that conference, the last 2 days, I've never seen anything like it. We had 10,000 delegates over the 2 days. I spoke to an audience of, I think, 4,000 or 5,000. The energy there, the hope that people have in Reform UK is, well, it's humbling. It's a huge responsibility. But of course, we are determined to fulfill the hopes of the British people and sort this country out. There's so much to do. And you're right, every day that goes by, Keir Starmer is just taking Nigel's lines, all of our lines, you know. Even myself, I find I say things and I think, gosh, the next day, Kemi's got the headline in the Telegraph. And I'm thinking, I'm sure I said that yesterday. But they're desperate. They're panicking. They're flip-flopping on all their policies. And yes, everything we say now, they're listening to.
What was the most important aspect of your speech to conference, which I will say went down a storm? What was the most important message that you wanted to convey?
I want to convey that I am a real person. I'm a grounded person. I've got a lot of life experience in different areas, business, legal experience, and just being a mum and a wife. But all of that combined, reform politicians, as I said in my speech, are real people, and we are fearless people, and we will take this on. We will take on these problems. We are brave enough to stand up and say we have to leave the ECHR, that we have to repeal the Human Rights Act, these things that aren't fit for purpose. Now, I know today that Keir Starmer is saying, oh, he's going to look at the ECHR and the Human Rights Act. Oh, come on, the British people are not going to be fooled by that rhetoric. They know that Reform, with people like myself, are the only party that will actually do these things.
One of the issues raised in your speech was about the state of the economy, and you're absolutely right that unfortunately growth is down, unemployment is up, the debt is through the roof. Reform UK are going to need financial firepower to stop the boats, to deport foreign criminals, to cut taxes and to retain, to scrap the two-child benefit cap. So the project, the manifesto, will be an expensive one. How does it get paid for with an economy shot to pieces in 4 years' time?
You're right about the economy, and goodness knows what state we're going to be in 4 years' time, because you know, there's already talk, isn't there, of us having to go for a handout to the IMF. I mean, Rachel Reeves has no control over the country's finances, yours and mine, taxpayers' money. But in terms of savings, in terms of where we find money to do the things we want to do, the first thing we do is we stop paying £5 million a day to support illegal migrants in this country, because we've said very clearly under a Reform government, nobody sets foot in this country. They're detained, they're deported, those bills stop. So that's the first thing. The second thing is something that Richard Tice, my colleague, talks a lot about and is very, very knowledgeable about, is how we save money through stopping these white elephant net zero projects that's costing us a fortune. We are one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest country in the world already when it comes to our carbon footprint. And yet we want to go still further, this net zero nonsense by 2030, and I think now it's moved to 20 God knows what, because the Labour government don't know what their policies are either in terms of net zero. But we are very clear that lot goes out the window. We go back to our own oil and gas reserves. We secure our own energy for businesses, because businesses in this country have got the highest energy costs anywhere in the West.
Indeed, but drill baby drill is going to take years to actually enact if reform were to achieve power. You're somebody that's run a business in the past successfully, Sarah. Are you not concerned about the Reform UK spreadsheet? Like I said, scrap the two-child benefit cap. That'll cost billions. Cut taxes, including taking a whole load of people out of tax who are lower paid. Deporting foreign criminals. Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill cost such a large amount of money because the deportations were going to cost a fortune. So the issue is the policies might look great, but the numbers don't add up, do they?
But there's more, Mark. You know, Zia Youssef is heading up our Doge unit. Already in the first, 3 months or whatever it is that they've been operating, a very short period of time, they have found millions of pounds, and we only control outrightly 10 councils. And that will, of course, change in the elections next May when we get many more. But already, those teams of experts are going in, they're finding the savings. I mean, the type of things that they're finding, amounting to millions of pounds of taxpayers' money that's wasted. So there's a whole pile of money there that local authorities are not using properly and are wasting. There's so much money when it comes to net zero, when it comes to diversity, DEI initiatives that we can use to direct in the way that we need to grow the economy. Because the thing about lowering taxes is that it creates growth. There is no other way to create growth. It has to be from the bottom up.
Sarah, Boris Johnson was responsible for our open borders over several years as Prime Minister, the so-called Boris wave, legal net migration of almost 1 million people in a year, net zero zealotry, the woke takeover of our public institutions, and the illiberal and economically catastrophic lockdowns during COVID. Why is his biggest and most high-profile cheerleader, Nadine Dorries, being accepted into Reform UK?
Look, my view on that is that anybody is welcome to join Reform UK, and look at our statistics. Even over the weekend, well, over Friday, Saturday at the conference, you know, the ticker was going up and up and up with people energised and wanting to be part of it. So I don't blame Nadine Dorries at all about wanting to be part of the reform movement, to be a member of the People's Army, and lots more, I'm sure, will want to join. And great, bring it on. In terms of Boris, my view on Boris is that he was probably the most disappointing Prime Minister that we've ever had. He's told us all for years, hasn't he, that he was born to do it, that it was his calling, and then in no time at all, he was the biggest disappointment ever. So there's no way that Boris would be back in or in reform. Nadine is a fan of Boris. We all know that. That's her opinion, you know. But look at Boris there. He's cute and he's ruffled, but gosh, he was an awful Prime Minister, wasn't he?
So you would veto, or at least express your concerns very publicly, if your boss, Nigel Farage, considered welcoming Boris Johnson into the reform fold?
Look, all I'm saying is Nigel Farage will be the next Prime Minister of this country. If Boris wants to join Reform UK as a member, along with the 242,000 people, I think it is, that we've currently got, then, you know, he's very free to do so. But Nigel Farage will be the next Prime Minister of this country. There's no doubt about that.
And would it be a mistake if Nigel Farage was to sort of publicly, you know, collaborate with Boris Johnson, forming some kind of partnership? Would that be a mistake?
I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think we need to go looking there. We have our own momentum, and as we made it very clear in all of our speeches by the members of Parliament for Reform over the last 2 days, we are looking for people that are experts in their field. We are looking for highly qualified, high caliber individuals. Now, Boris, as I say, is as sweet and ruffled as he looks. You know, he's not proved himself when it came to actually walking the walk and not talking the talk, Boris fell, didn't he? Whereas what we have got in our current members of parliament, in our chairman, in Zia Youssef, are people that are experts in their field. They're people that speak with conviction and will never change their stance. You won't get any flip-flopping from Reform.
Lucy Connolly featured at the conference on a podcast hosted by Alison Pearson of The Telegraph. She'd like to work with Reform UK. Many people consider her prison sentence to have been incredibly disproportionate. That said, within her post on X, she was quite relaxed about the idea of migrant hotels being burnt down. Is that a problem for your party?
Look, I think Lucy Connolly has shown remorse, which is very important. As you know, I was a magistrate for 20 years. It's very important that people understand when they have done something foolish. And I think this is that's the right word for what Lucy did. It was foolish. It was emotion, at the time. And we all obviously felt very strongly about what had happened there in Southport. But yes, you know what? I'll be very much looking forward to talking with Lucy myself. As you know, the whole justice brief is an area that I'm very interested in and knowledgeable about. So I will be very much looking forward to talking to Lucy about her experience inside a women's prison. I've obviously visited a women's prison myself during my career as a magistrate. And so, yes, I'll be very much looking forward to having that conversation with her. And I'm sure that she will have an insight from the front line, if you like, that will be very valuable when it comes to setting policies.
Is she a hero?
I don't think she's a hero. I think what's happened is it's an example of two-tier justice. It's an example, in my view, of where the judiciary has been overtaken by the political establishment. And I feel very strongly that politics and the judiciary should be kept separate. And that is why I resigned as a magistrate to fight the by-election for Reform UK. You cannot mix the two. And without doubt, our judiciary has become politicised. And I think Lucy Connolly, and by the way, I have two men in my constituency, Runcorn residents, who have both suffered in exactly the same way as Lucy Connolly has. One has just been released, another, they've both just been released, one on Thursday of this week, the second one. But, their lives have been turned upside down, victims of injustice.
You described in your speech illegal immigration as an invasion. Is that language helpful and constructive?
That language is entirely appropriate to what we are facing. You only have to look at the pictures that we're seeing, or in someone like Nigel's case, he goes down, doesn't he, gets on a boat in the channel and he watches what's going on. It is now an invasion. We are facing a national security emergency. We have no idea who these people are on these boats because, by the way, we do no checks. We take them in. Do you know that we don't take their DNA? We don't take their fingerprints. We don't do any facial biometric recognition, nothing. You try getting into the States without going through all of that. So we have no idea who's terrorists, who are spies for hostile regimes, who have criminal records. What we do know, is they're getting here and they are disrupting our communities beyond all recognition. Yes, it's an invasion. We are facing these, please don't call them small boats anymore. They're boats with 70, 80 young men, young military-aged men, and you'll get the odd woman when the BBC camera's there. But let's face it, yes, it's an invasion of young fighting-age men into this country. We need to stop it.
Now, they're breaking the law. It's deeply wrong. But is there a danger of demonising everybody that crosses the channel as a rapist, a murderer or terrorist?
I've never said that. What I've said is that anybody that crosses the channel illegally is a criminal. It's a criminal act, arriving in this country illegally. We do know, however, to come to your particular point, that there is a correlation between the number of sexual assaults and rapes on women and girls, a correlation with the increasing number of migrants, foreign nationals in this country. It's a fact. So let's not be in denial about that. That is quite different from me saying everyone on those boats is going to sexually assault a woman in this country. Of course, I'm not saying that. But let's not be in denial about the threat that women and girls are under in our communities. I have many examples in my own constituency, in my own town of Runcorn, of where this is happening. So yeah, it's happening, and we need to face up to it, and we need to get tough on it. But the only way to do it is to stop the pull factors into this country.
Mr. Farage is quite comfortable with the idea of deporting female asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, possibly to dangerous countries like Afghanistan, where they could be tortured, punished, imprisoned and murdered. Does that weigh on your conscience?
No. The fact is that anybody that arrives here illegally is a criminal and should be detained and deported. It doesn't matter what sex you are. And we cannot be responsible for the regimes around the world. Afghanistan with the Taliban is one that we talk about a lot, because clearly an awful lot of Afghans are coming in illegally. But the point is there are many regimes around the world which treat women atrociously. But we can't be responsible for all of that. We have so many problems here at home that need sorting out. And what reform will do, and what Nigel Farage has made very clear, is that we will put the British people first.
You've obviously paid a significant personal price for your entry into public life and into politics, Sarah. I was shocked to hear in your very compelling speech that you now need security. What does that tell you about the nature of political discourse in this country in 2025?
Absolutely. So if I'm out in my constituency, I always now have to have a bodyguard. It sounds very dramatic, but unfortunately that is the way it is. And depending on the type of event I'm at, maybe even 2 or 3 bodyguards. Yeah, it is a personal risk, but no one will stop me doing what I'm doing, because I so believe that we need to be brave, and as I said, we are fearless. We will do it. We will not be intimidated. But yeah, it's a fact, isn't it? You know, I am high profile. I'm the first female member of Parliament for Reform, and on top of that, I'm talking about the whole justice area. I'm talking about the illegal immigration problem that we have. So I'm not talking about soft, cosy topics, but you know, that's the whole point of reform. Is we are prepared to stand up, be brave, and say the things and do the things when we get in government that need to be done.
Well, I think your majority of 6 is likely to grow significantly, not just because of your profile and hopefully your efforts as a constituency MP, but because the polls tell us, for the first time in the last 24 hours, the poll of polls, Sarah, has a majority, a working majority for Reform UK. I suspect that will grow. Are you concerned that when in power, it may be difficult to deliver the manifesto to which you are clearly very ideologically and emotionally attached? You're going to face the blob, the bureaucracy, the lawfare, where, you know, woke judges and lawyers will make every effort to thwart the reform agenda. Are you worried about not just victory, but delivery in 4 years' time?
No, because the government of the day and the previous government for 14 years, they could do these things. It's about having the will to do these things. So it's about having the will to leave the ECHR. The Conservatives could have done that. Labour could have done that. Labour will never, ever leave the ECHR. And by the way, I don't believe the Conservatives ever would either. But the point is, we will. Yes, it's going to take, I don't know, 6 months, I think, I heard, to actually, you know, start to finish. But on day one of getting into power, we will start the process of leaving the ECHR. And the reason that is so important is because it stops this whole industry that has built up of left-wing lawyers, human rights lawyers, that make a fortune defending the endless appeal cases.
And you must have witnessed some of these characters at first hand as a former magistrate.
Well, I mean, I've never been involved with a human rights appeal type case. That's a different area of law. I was a criminal court magistrate and a family court magistrate. Okay. But the point is, what we do know is you can do it, but you have to take away the legislation that these lawyers use to stop the deportations. And we have said very clearly in our deportation bill that the policy, that we put forward, was it only last week? I can't remember the days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago in Oxford, that we launched. We will suspend the legislation that stops the deportations happening. We can do it under the Vienna Convention, where you can justify a state of national emergency, and that is exactly the action that we will take. So these governments could have done it. They haven't done it. Who has put the needs of the British people first over the last two governments? And prior to that, you know, Blair started this, Cameron carried on with this, and look at the state we're in. We are in a situation where, yes, we will declare effectively that the legislation is suspended and we will deport. And not only that, we will go into the communities where illegal migrants have now been lost to the Home Office. They don't know where they are, and we will find and deport anyone that is here illegally.
Do you fear the wrath of the British public if you're not able to deport as many as you hoped? Even Donald Trump, with his vast resources, is struggling to roll out that agenda. Do you fear the wrath of my viewers and listeners if within 2 weeks we haven't stopped the boats, which is Nigel Farage's freshest commitment?
Well, I think the point that Nigel was making there, and the point that I would say, is the sort of things that we can do immediately are, you know, let's get the Navy in the Channel. Let's make a statement. Let's make it all start to look like we're taking this seriously. Let's make sure that every single person that lands on those beaches is immediately picked up and taken and put on a, you know, like a ship out in the Channel at least. They never come ashore. These things can be done immediately. Absolutely. It's about the will of the government. I would like to hope that no one from day one of a reform government gets taken into this country and put into a 4-star hotel, clothed, fed, given a mobile phone, given driving lessons, given cinema tickets. That is so not going to happen under a reform government. So there are things that we can do immediately in terms of taking the legislation away. Then yes, as I say, I think 6 months probably is a realistic time frame for leaving the ECHR. But gosh, that's 6 months of a good investment, because that sort of legislation is no longer fit for purpose. But only reform has the will to do this, and the British people know it, because they've been let down by every other party, former politician, and so all their hopes are resting on reform.
Before I let you go, you've paid a high personal price, which I think is so wrong. You shouldn't have to have security in Britain because of the platform that you stand on, particularly one that, based upon the polls, will be our next government. So that's obviously an outrageous thing. Any regrets about entering the public sphere in this way? You must have lost a few friends. Have you had a few dirty looks, you know, at those posh dinner parties and all the rest of it?
Well, sadly, posh dinner parties are a thing of the past, partly because I start work about 5 o'clock in the morning, so there's no way I could do that. But no, the reverse. What's actually happened in my own personal circle of friends is that people have actually stopped whispering about reform, and they've come out and said, you know what, I voted reform. And it's like, well, hallelujah. And that's the change. People are starting to be proud about voting for reform. And I'll tell you what, the last 2 days of that conference, that could not have been achieved by a Conservative government or a Labour government. It was energetic. We sang the national anthem. Everybody stood up, loud and proud. And the energy in that room is what will take us into government.
Well, I mean, I think Nigel's got to look over his shoulder, because clearly if they win the election, if you guys win the election, then you'll be in the running for a cabinet post and potentially a future leader as well. Because what struck me about your speech is that you're fearless. You won't be censored. You've got nothing to lose. You're out there. It was certainly a very bold and striking speech. And actually, there are a couple of figures within reform who I think have been less courageous than you and perhaps at times thrown you under the bus, including the former party chairman, Zia Youssef, who threw a bit of shade in your direction over a suggested burqa ban, which I think is a brilliant idea, by the way. I'd get rid of all facial coverings because I think they're incredibly sexist, and when it comes to other people wearing masks, well, it's great for criminals. So I support your policy of banning the burqa, but the party chairman, Zia Youssef, have you patched things up?
Azir and I are genuinely great friends. He's always been a great supporter of mine. We have no issues at all. We work very well together. I hugely admire and respect Azir. He's an incredibly intelligent man, and he helps me an awful lot. So, no, there's no issue with me and Azir.
There you go. It's a broad church, isn't it? And we're allowed to disagree, even within one political party. Sarah, thank you so much for giving so much of your time. My viewers and listeners are sending a lot of messages in. I love Sarah, says Fiona. I have one thing to say, however. Please think twice what would happen by our... Sorry, let me just read this correctly. Please think what would happen by our government today and tomorrow if reform wasn't there for our country. That's from Fiona. Sarah, we'll catch up soon. Have a great Sunday.
God, no. The woman couldn't stop anything if she wanted to, because, again, she's actually quite incompetent, but she hires well. That's her great skill. She hires well. But what I will say is Shabana Mahmood, she used to be the Labour Party's Director of Election Strategy. So basically she ran election campaigns for the Labour Party internally, and she was the one that put race at the centre of everything.
Yes.
She was the one that played the race card. She wrote again and again and again. She pitted communities against each other. She tore communities apart with her elections.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, folks, at 9 a.m, Annunciata Rees-Mogg is on the show. How many more high-profile Conservatives are going to flock to Reform UK? Annunciata Rees-Mogg at 9 a.m. Don't miss it. Plus, my Dolan's dispatch as well, in which I'll be talking about Reform UK and asking, are they ready for government? But the current incumbents are the Labour Party under the tutelage of Sir Keir Starmer. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph, PM to move migrants to army barracks. Migrants in asylum seeker hotels will be moved into barracks on former military bases under plans to be unveiled within weeks. Shabana Mahmood who is, of course, the new Home Secretary, is set to announce the policy imminently after being instructed by Sir Keir Starmer to, and I quote, get a grip on the small boats crisis. Let's debate this now in the company of Luke Hildyard, who is the Executive Director of the High Centre, and Chloe Dobbs, who is a political commentator. Luke, your thoughts about this headline?
Yeah, High Pay Centre is where I've worked, by the way,
I wondered about that.
rather than the High Centre. People might say that about some of our policy recommendations, but no, we're the High Pay Centre. We do work on
I actually wouldn't mind spending some time at somewhere that's called the High Centre.
I think it'd be very interesting if there was a think tank dedicated to that purpose, but sadly it's not us.
Yeah.
On the proposals on army barracks, I mean, it certainly makes sense that these are government resources, like government accommodation, and that if we need to house people somewhere, that seems a cost-effective way of doing it. I haven't seen the detail of the plans. I've got to say, I personally feel we're getting a little bit more worked up about the small boats arrivals and migration generally than we need to be. I know that's going to be a controversial opinion. The small boats arrivals are a small proportion of total immigration in the UK. It's interesting that immigration has fallen a lot in the past couple of years. We had the so-called Boris wave, and it's now dropped off quite a lot, but the kind of as a topic in the media.
Well, wasn't it about a year ago? It was sort of the last calendar year, wasn't it? Still in the sort of ballpark of 800,000.
I think my understanding is it's about halved from the levels that it previously was. I think it's certainly fair to say that, you know, depending on, you know, people will have different views on what the right level is, and people may think it's still too high, but it's certainly come down a lot. The birth rate
thanks to Rishi Sunak.
The birth rate is, well, I mean, I think it's probably more a result of natural economic factors. For example, I think the number of people from places like Ukraine and Hong Kong has slowed off a lot. There've obviously been some controversial protests around the issue, and people feel very animated about it. I think it's also worth keeping in perspective that, like, the big weekend of protests that was being hyped up in the press the other week, the aggregate attendance of that was about the same as you'd get at a mid-table League One football match. So I think, you know, important not to dismiss people's feelings, but also not to over-extrapolate from a small number of protests. As I say, clearly people feel very strongly about this. Using government property to house people in a cost-effective way while their claims are processed, on the face of it, that seems quite a sensible idea to me.
Yeah, I mean, you are quite dismissive about the scale of the figures, with this suggestion that 50,000 a year isn't much, given that legal net migration is, you know, certainly in the past has been close to 1 million. So 50k versus 1 million doesn't sound much, does it? But accommodating 50,000 people is costing around £3 to £4 billion a year, which is money that's not going to people at the bottom end of the social ladder in this country. So, and of course, 50k, again, doesn't sound a lot. That's $250,000 over 5 years. Does it not bother you, Luke, as a voice of the left, that we're importing people who are going to be a huge drain on the nation's finances, resources that should be going to the poor already here?
Well, I think firstly, we need more workers in this country. We've got, as I say, we've got a falling birth rate, and I think that you know, if people coming into the country are allowed to work, they'll generate income to support themselves, generate income and tax revenue for the UK economy. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Look, I wouldn't. How
many of the people of those 50k per year will wind up on benefits? I would suggest 90%.
I wouldn't know the figure. That seems quite a large one to me.
Do you think they're all doctors and engineers crossing the channel?
I think in general, people come here because they want to work. I don't think they want to come here for the
low-paid workers and low-skilled. We don't need it.
I wouldn't dismiss. I think low-skilled workers is this quite dismissive term. You know, high-skilled.
Well, it's a description of who they are. They're not doctors and engineers.
But doctors can't work if there aren't hospital porters keeping the hospitals clean.
Right. Well, that's a low-skilled job.
Well, you know, you can use that term. We need people doing those kind of jobs for high-skilled workers to get to to do their so-called high-skilled work and pay taxes.
We will need a mixture of high-skilled and low-skilled workers in this country, but we need an immigration system where we bring those people on a needs basis. So we look at the different industries, see where there are gaps, and bring them in. And we know who exactly is coming in this country. When you say, oh, the number of people coming across on the boats, it's a drop in the ocean compared to the overall numbers. The reason why that small number is so significant is because if you've got the ability to come in this country with no checks, no passport whatsoever, that means that a few terrorists can come in the country if they want a way to get into this country and commit an attack. It's a huge security issue. And then on the cost to the taxpayer, what really angers people is if you come here legally on a visa, you might, for example, have a requirement to earn a certain amount of money and to be able to sustain yourself. But what really angers people is when they see some people being treated better than them, who aren't having to work, who are sitting in a hotel, who have literally broken the law by breaking into this country. They're getting up every day, setting their alarms to work hard and pay their taxes, and they see their taxes are going to people who get to have a nice buffet in a hotel, free meals a day,
pick up this
castle trips.
debate. Should we? I'm
I'm
going to get you to come back straight after the break, because what we need to do, we're going to debate this. Should we be relaxed about illegal immigration because we need the workers? That is the implication of Luke Hildyard. We'll debate more on that straight after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Listen, at 9 a.m, how many more high-profile Conservatives are going to head to Reform? I'll be asking Annunciata Rees-Mogg, who's on the show at 9. Plus, my Dolan dispatch, are Reform UK ready for government? Don't miss that. But I'm delighted to say with me in the studio, we've got Luke Hildyard, who is the Executive Director of the High Pay Centre, and Chloe Dobbs, who's a brilliant political commentator. Luke, back to you. You gave the impression in your earlier answer that you're quite relaxed about 50,000 people entering the country illegally because of the skills gap in this country.
Right. Well, just to come back to Chloe's point that she was making before the break, I think with every respect, it's not fair to say that these people have having a wonderful life. They're crossing one of the world's busiest shipping lanes in incredibly dangerous circumstances, to live in hotels where there's angry mobs outside waiting to, who aren't pleased about them being there. This isn't something that people do lightly. They aren't, living the good life. I think it's something that people only do when they're in really desperate circumstances. And, and of course...
Why are they fleeing France?
And of course we can say that they should be, that we need sort of more secure border control. I think absolutely agree that we need to know who's coming into the country. What I'd say about that is, of course, border security resources cost money, and that we, the public, are gonna have to pay that. So if we're willing to spend more money on that, and that's the sort of choice we want to make as a society, then let's do that. As to the point about people coming here to work, I think while people are waiting to claim asylum, we should let them work. So
doesn't that reward somebody for breaking the law by entering the country?
Well,
illegally?
it doesn't reward them, because they're having to go out and and work.
The ability to work is a civil right, isn't it?
I think
because you get a national insurance number and you become part of the economic infrastructure of the country.
I mean, the practicalities of it aren't the issue. The practicalities of it aren't the issue. The issue is, should we be letting people work and contribute if they're here anyway? And I think it seems to me common sense for the UK as a economy as a whole that they should. The other point I want to make again is about the costs here. And again,
eye-watering.
And again, I would strongly emphasise that I'm very much with you, that we want to know who's coming into the country, and we want to do what's economically sensible. But the costs, they're significant. At the same time, you look at the potential to implement a wealth tax in the UK on the very richest people with millions and millions of pounds, who could pay a wealth tax, and even after they've paid the wealth tax, they're still going to be very, very rich with millions of pounds. And that would be 4 or 5 times the cost of... That would be the 4 or 5 times the cost of accommodating a few asylum seekers. We'd also have more money for the NHS, more money for the education system.
Luke, we need to get back to this, because I'm actually going to try to engage with you in a sort of space about which you're passionate, which is the poor. Right? Do you care about the poor?
Yeah.
What do you think of poor people? In this country, What's your view of the poor?
Well, I think
we people that can't pay the bills, can't heat their homes, can't feed their kids, can't clothe their kids. What do you think of those people?
I think they have a very hard life, and I think the poorest people in the UK are now poorer than the poorest people in Eastern European countries.
How does it help if 50,000 poor people enter the country illegally every year and stay and start working?
Well,
how does that help the poor of this country?
It certainly helps the poor people who are coming into this.
I don't care. I'm going to shout.
Shouldn't we take care
I don't care. Let me tell you something right now on the radio. I don't care about poor people overseas.
Yeah.
Okay? I care about poor people in the United Kingdom, of which you will confirm there are millions. So I don't understand why the left don't want to stop the boats, because just to accommodate illegal immigrants in the UK in hotels is $3 billion a year. That's money that could go to mums and dads struggling to feed their kids in this country, who are part of families that are paid into the system for generations and decades. That's why I'm cross, and I don't normally raise my voice about it, but I'm actually giving you the left-wing socialist argument against the boats.
Well, firstly, was that happening? Was all this money going to poor people before we had, the small boats, so-called crisis?
It was available to poor people, and we now have a Labour government who, presumably, if there was that cash floating around, they probably would.
Well, they are putting quite a lot of money into the NHS, and the NHS, and we're seeing waiting times fall, and all people are benefiting from that. I don't think it's a choice between the two. And as I say, I don't think
every asylum seeker we help is a poor person in this country that we're not helping. And I really do admire your desire to help people coming from difficult situations around the world. I do care.
Fearing death and persecution.
Yeah, I do care about, there are so many people in the world living in poverty and war-stricken countries, but we need to be pragmatic and recognise we very sadly cannot save everybody in this world. We've got to, A, help our own people first, and if we are going to help people from other countries, we should be prioritising the people who need it the most, and that is the women and children who are living in places like Afghanistan. I'd rather have those people than all the men coming across on the boat. So if we're going to take anybody as refugees, it should be legal routes and it should be women and children only. And then if you bring women and children only, you're not going to have all the troubles with men with backward views about women coming here committing sexual assaults. We've just found out, for example, the Ethiopian at the Bell Hotel in Epping has been found guilty. That has infuriated people who have thought this guy shouldn't have been in this country in the first place. That never should have happened.
But I don't think we can generalise 50,000 people off that one case.
But we have so many stats now.
It's also easy to say that women and children should come. It's incredibly dangerous getting here.
Do you accept that
exactly, it's very dangerous for the women
from Eritrea, Afghanistan and Somalia have a different attitude to women than British-born citizens?
Say again, sorry?
Do you accept that people coming from Afghanistan, Eritrea and Somalia have different attitudes towards women than
I suspect different people
British...
from those countries all have... I wouldn't say they all have a attitude towards women.
Afghanistan,
in any country,
Afghanistan where women aren't allowed to go to university.
Well, I think a lot of people are leaving Afghanistan precisely because of the attitude of the regime towards.
Look, I don't want to be too hard on you, Luke, because I actually salute your work, okay, at the High Pay Centre. I think it's of critical importance, and there's a secret lefty in me that actually wants to tackle inequality and poverty. And this is just sort of my roadblock with regard to the left and the boats, which is it's just so against the interest of the poor in our country to have open borders.
I certainly don't support.
Because it's competition for resources, isn't it?
I certainly don't support open borders, and I don't think
many
people on the left do. I think what I would say is I think we're overstating the impact of the people coming by small boats, and also I don't think it at all prevents us from doing far more than we're currently doing to support people in need in the UK as well.
Okay, well look, I'm really grateful that Luke is here, okay, because he does good work at the High Pay Centre, and I think this show and this channel is about debate, and we all feel very passionately about it. What we all want is a better world, but I'm trying to convey the socialist argument for stopping the boats, and I don't understand why the left are not worried about it, because I think it impacts the poorest in our country. And yes, if you're asking me to choose between whether I'm more worried about poor people in Britain and poor people abroad, I'm worried about people in Britain who are poor, and I'll tell you for why. Because there are probably 2.5 to 3 billion people in the world who are poor, who live below the poverty line. They can't all come to the UK, can they? But look, maybe I've lost the plot here. We'll keep debating this. Get your calls in. Book your calls on that later in the show. I want to know whether you think that actually illegal immigration is a solution to our staffing crisis in the public sector, etc. 0344 499 1000. We're having quite a ding-dong. It will continue after this.
No. God, no. The woman couldn't stop anything if she wanted to, because, again, she's actually quite incompetent, but she hires well. That's her great skill. She hires well. But what I will say is Shabana Mahmood, she used to be the Labour Party's Director of Election Strategy. So basically, she ran election campaigns for the Labour Party internally, and she was the one that put race at the centre of everything.
Yes.
She was the one that played the race card. She wrote again and again and again. She pitted communities against each other. She tore communities apart with her elections.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're having a fantastic debate here on Talk about the merits or otherwise of immigration, and even possibly a more creative and calm overview about illegal immigration. I mean, I think something that's quite powerful, Chloe Dobbs, in regard to what Luke Hildyard had to say, is that 50k a year of illegal immigration, right, it's too many. It's costing us a fortune in hotel accommodation, etc. But I think that Luke has a point that if you stop the boats overnight, life wouldn't suddenly improve for ordinary Brits.
I mean, the national security of this country certainly would improve, and there are certain communities where there's been a hotspot. So, for example, in a place like Epping, where parents are massively concerned about the welfare of their children, and they're trying to talk to them on the way home. You'd have certain communities where their lives would suddenly improve from a safety perspective. But one thing...
What about the local rapists and murderers?
Of course, those still exist as well. But there is, where there is a big issue, Mark, is most people are busy people and have to go to work during the day. But what you've got in hotels is you've got, look, even if you put a bunch of British boys in a hotel, a load of boys together with nothing to do all day, of course they get up to no good. Don't be surprised if they go sit on the street corner and look at girls' bums and start wolf whistling at them, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen if you put a load of boys who aren't at work in a hotel with nothing to do. So it is an issue regardless of who is in there. And then combine that with the fact that you have got people coming who are coming from countries where they don't understand our attitudes to women. They've got a different attitude to women. So, I mean, for example, we have heard people who have been, you know, migrants who have been done for, whether it's, you know, sexual assault or rape, whatever, saying, oh, I didn't understand the cultural difference. In my country, it's normal for kids to get married. You're married at 12, 13. We don't really know what consent is. But that absolutely doesn't excuse their behaviour. So you are going to have problems. But you are right that life generally across the country would not suddenly improve for everybody overnight. And that is one thing I think Reform do have to be careful with, is managing expectations. I think, you know, I do support the Reform Party, but I think they need to be careful to not promise the world overnight even when they come into power.
Luke, do you think we are going from one extreme to the other, where we're now actually demonising all migrants? And obviously, if you look at the Windrush generation, the NHS wouldn't function without all of those folks who are doctors and nurses and hospital porters, as you say. So are you concerned about the sort of public mood out there that what's happening is that wider migration is being conflated with the boats?
Yeah, I certainly think we're talking this up into a bigger issue than it is. If you know, I thought you put it very well in your question there. If every boat stopped tomorrow, how much better is anyone's life going to get? It's not going to get much better. I think, you know, we do need immigration, a certain level of immigration to this country. As we talked about the declining birth rate, you've talked about the staffing needs of the NHS and other public services. We've got an ageing population. We're going to need people to care for older people. So I think we have to be careful with how we manage this debate. I certainly wouldn't want to give the impression that I just think, you know, let everybody in, you know, open the borders, etc. I think we definitely do need to manage who's coming into this country and to try and match up the people that come in with the with the skills and the occupations that we need. I also think that a lot of what we're seeing with these protests, particularly the places we saw them last year, they're in parts of Britain that have been neglected by the government and by big business and by the rich. They tend to have lower educational outcomes, lower levels of opportunity in those areas. They've been hit particularly hard by the public service cuts of the past 15 years, and if you go to certain communities in Britain, you do sort of see that in the buildings and the the boarded up
Are they
shops
also not in places where multiculturalism isn't working?
Well, it's fascinating because you're not seeing them in inner city London, for example. I live in a very multicultural area where there isn't, I wouldn't want to be utopian about where I live. It certainly has its problems, but very diverse area and different communities get along well. I think it's I'm not sure that is it. As I say, I feel it's in places that have been let down a bit by the government and by business.
Well, look, I'm so grateful to both of you because we had a debate, which is what the nation needs to do, is debate these things. Chloe Dobbs and Luke Hildyard, thank you so much. Please come back soon, both of you. Next up, Annunziata Rees-Mogg on the brain drain from the Tory party to reform and my Dolan dispatch. Don't go anywhere.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Talk, the home of common sense. A big hour to come. Happy Sunday morning to one and all. And I've got a very full British breakfast for you. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced a plan to move asylum seekers from hotels to army barracks. And as the government look at an overhaul of the Human Rights Act and even our membership of the ECHR, is Starmer trying to out-Farage Nigel Farage? Are you convinced? Does that wash with you? Will it work? Speaking of the Reform leader, a new threshold has been reached. I'll bring you exclusive details of a new poll showing that for the first time, a full overall majority for a Farage-led government. But are they ready for power? And an explosive headline in today's Mail on Sunday. If you're watching on YouTube, let me hold this up to the camera. This is going to put a cat among the pigeons. As Boris loyalist Nadine Dorries joins Reform UK, should Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson team up to crush Labour and deliver a political revolution? Or would this be Reform's first and biggest own goal? Boris to Reform, what say you? 0344 499 1000. An election-winning machine or a political liability? Also, will Reform UK really stop the boats within 2 weeks of entering office? And how many more senior Conservatives will flock to Reform? I'll be asking Annunciata Rees-Mogg in just a couple of minutes' time. Plus, the Titanic deck shares reshuffle continues. I'll bring further reaction. So lots to get through. It is Mark Dolan with you for Weekend Breakfast here on Talk. I'm here today and I'm back next weekend from Saturday and Sunday. Looking forward to that, and covering for Julia tomorrow from 10 till 1. It's a thrill to be back at the home of common sense. I've missed current affairs. I've missed you. I've missed these conversations. And you and I have got a country to sort out, so let's get to work. And we start with today's Dolan's Dispatch. You hear the word change bandied around a lot, don't you? It's all about change in political circles. Now, normally it's a glib slogan, vote for change. We'll change this, we'll change that. But at this point in our great country's history, the need for change is more than a slogan. It is existential. Establishment media and the legacy political parties did not get the memo that in just about every way that you can conceive, Britain is collapsing. The media, political and public sector and corporate elite who dominate the national conversation and have all the power are insulated from the grim and painful reality of Britain's decline. We're in decline. This great country is dying. TV and radio hosts, lanyard-wielding civil servants, fat cat bosses, politicians from the legacy parties, they don't get it. They don't get it that the country is crumbling. And I shall explain why in just a moment. But they don't get it. Why don't they get it? Well, because migrant hotels don't hurt them. Inflation doesn't hurt them. High taxes don't hurt them. The crumbling nature of our public services doesn't hurt them. This is the same media, political, corporate and public sector elite who loved the lockdowns during the pandemic. They loved the lockdowns. Why? Because they had gorgeous North London houses with sprawling south-facing gardens. That's the truth of it. But ordinary folk are suffering. And for many, they feel that finally they have a voice through Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Can he deliver? Is he the real deal? Well, that is the million-dollar question. Because if they win in 4 years' time and don't deliver, they'll be held to pay. I think that's it. It's over for the country. At this point, the question of whether reform can deliver is almost academic. I'm not sure I really care. Because most people listening to this, I would guess, would rather have someone in number 10 that at least says what they think and appears to actually live in the real world, where getting a dental appointment is like winning the lottery, and where seeing your GP this side of Christmas is a pipe dream. Whilst they have it all to do, Reform have already had an important first step in the political discourse. Because what they've started to do, which no politician has done for decades now, is to listen to the public. Why is Nigel Farage popular? Because people feel heard. They feel heard about aggressive foreign-born men harassing women and threatening their safety. They feel heard about the abject failure of the multicultural experiment, with certain communities living parallel lives, speaking a different language, adhering to different values, and in a sense, living in a different country. That is not what a melting pot looks like. Why is Nigel Farage popular? Because people feel heard about cripplingly high taxes, which is making even middle earners struggle to keep the bills paid. People feel heard about inflation, a devastating tax on all of us, but impacting the poorest most. People feel heard about shockingly high energy bills, which are directly linked to Britain's catastrophic net zero experiment, which to me has echoes of COVID all over again. I think net zero is the same as COVID, a crazy solution to a problem that, yes, I'll accept exists. We had COVID, then we had the lockdowns, which killed our economy. Well, you've got rising temperatures globally, but we're responsible for 1%, and yet we're going to bankrupt our economy in a vain attempt to do something about it. If Britain sank into the sea, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to global warming, but yet this government so attached to the project. The bottom line is what you got with net zero is authoritarianism, debated science, a restriction of our freedom, the silencing of our critics, and impossible financial cost. Farage gets that, the others do not. People feel heard when they say that they can't crack a joke anymore, admit in public that they voted for Brexit or have small c conservative opinions. People feel heard that now they can say out loud that there are two sexes, or that it's a crime to love your country, or that's how it feels. So Reform UK has already had a positive impact in the country, but any success it has will likely preserve and success our democracy because ordinary people have a voice. People feel represented by a political party for the first time in living memory. Right now, the Tories, the Lib Dems and Labour are largely preaching to a narrow constituency in North London with their metropolitan woke values, which sound excellent at dinner parties that they hold in their £2 million townhouses. If a reform political revolution comes, as with Trump in America, it will be fuelled by ordinary people who feel heard. Ordinary working people who our current Prime Minister has such a notorious difficulty defining. So it's highly likely that Reform will win the next election. I think their lead in the polls underestimates their support. And therein lies the most impossible challenge. It's one thing to win power, it is another to deliver. Are Reform the real deal? Can Nigel deliver? Does he have the application and work ethic of Margaret Thatcher and the focus and the ruthlessness? I'm not sure. It's a big old roll of the dice, isn't it? I think that Reform and Nigel and his team are unproven. They've got no candidates. The policies aren't really costed. It's back of the fag packet stuff, if you ask me. So there's a massive question mark over the Reform project. But is it any worse than what we've currently got from the establishment legacy parties? I suspect not. So to win is one thing, to deliver is another. Farage can have his fun on TikTok and pose for photos in the pub, no problem. His accessibility and charm are part of the formula, part of the Reform message. But whilst I think that talk of an election in 2027 is unlikely, no matter how divided Labour are, turkeys won't vote for Christmas, it's almost certainly going to be an election in 2029. That's when we're going to have the next election. This gives Nigel and his team 4 critical years to do what Labour didn't do for 14 years, which is make a plan for government. Crunch the numbers, make the sums add up, establish a legally bulletproof plan to stop the boats, and create a workable plan to reduce legal net migration to a trivial number and tap into the existing workforce on our own shores. The upwards of 8 million people of working age who are not active in the economy. Now, Donald Trump was thwarted in his first term in what amounted to a rather forgettable 4 years. Well, as you can see, he's back with a vengeance and has achieved more in a few months than some presidents achieve in 2 terms. Reform will only get one chance. There won't be a second term. Reform will only get one bite of the cherry in 2029, and they must take it. They've got to hit a home run at the first time of asking. If they fail, Britain will be a hot mess, with multiple parties on the left and right splintering, with decades of hung parliaments and political deadlock. If he wins in 4 years' time, this is Nigel Farage's only chance. And in a sense, it's our only chance too. Your reaction, 03444991000. Reform are unproven. It's the great unknown, but surely better than what we've got now. 03444991000 is our number. Let's get the views now of the political commentator and somebody that's part of the excellent Conservative movement, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, the Real Conservatives. Annunziata, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you, Mark?
I'm very well. And listen, first of all, your reaction to what you've just heard. I mean, this is difficult for you, isn't it? Because traditionally you are a Conservative Party supporter. What do you make of the rise of Reform UK?
I think it's crucial. I think our country has been abandoned by its leaders, and I think there are huge reasons behind that, the Tories discovered that they couldn't actually get through so much of what they wanted to get through because of the legacy of Tony Blair undermining our democracy, meaning ministers couldn't enact the policies they'd been elected on, but they should have changed it. And it's inexcusable that after 14 years they hadn't undone the Supreme Court, the ECHR, the embeddedness and reluctance to operate of the civil service, the Equalities Act, and so on and so forth, let alone the quangos that have no answerability to the public at all. We need drastic change in this country. The status quo that the mainstream parties have been so comfortable with is not sustainable. It has let down the British people. It has betrayed our trust in politics almost entirely. And we just see from this week's reshuffle that there's nothing the mainstream parties can do because they can't actually change things. They can shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic, but they can't make things happen. And we need to see real change. That does mean Reform have a huge opportunity. But as you said, if they mess it up, if they don't enact the change, if they don't stop the boats in the first 2 weeks, if they don't make the public not only feel listened to, but demonstrate that they are doing what the public want, then we're in a really much worse situation than the current just distrust.
You are head of communications at Popular Conservatism. Are Reform UK now Britain's Real Conservatives?
No, I think they have had a fantastic conference, that there was a huge energy, there was a massive positive attitude, and a lot of their people are becoming more and more serious, that they're really looking at the policy detail and becoming what could be an opposition, a true movement that can enact change. But they're not there yet. That there are still a lot of wild cards. There are a lot of promises that I just don't think anyone believes that they can actually keep. They've got to do the work. They've got the councils, they've got the mayoralties. They need to demonstrate that they can get things done to really build that trust and make sure they can deliver. They're not there yet. But the polls are showing they could well have that responsibility thrust upon them. Are they to the right? a lot of them are, but was Farage saying just this week that he was going to have defections from Labour? Absolutely. Are they targeting the red wall in the north of England? They really are. And I think they've got to decide which path they're going to tread, because if they continue to try and be all things to all people, they will lose people again from the right who have come in. And then you've got, say, Nadine Dorries, who is has a huge fan club within the Conservative Party. And her book, The Plot, was probably the most widely read political book by right-wing activists in the existence of political books. But she's going to put off an awful lot of those left-wing supporters that they also rely on in order to get this majority.
Are the Tories dead and buried? And if you are somebody that's on the right, is it now your duty to back Reform UK? I'll be asking Annunziata Rees-Mogg next.
He knows how to solve the £50 billion black hole problem. He just stop feeding David Lammy and let him fly around the world.
Come on, look, I've got somebody else for you. This is fun. Look, here we are.
Hello, chaps.
The chairman of Reform has come
nice
by.
to see you too.
How hard have we been working today?
Really well. And look, I have to just say thank you so much for everything you did. It was just so good to have you.
It was great. It was good fun.
It was really good, and you were fantastic with people. And that's the point I've been making about this party, which is it is built from the bottom up, not the top down. And you can see that, can't you? You saw the enthusiasm.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Should King Charles and Prince Harry kiss and make up? I'll be asking our brilliant royal correspondent Rupert Bell at 9:30. Rumours that the two men may meet when Harry arrives in London for the Well Child Awards. Plus, your calls later in the hour. Should Nigel Farage consider welcoming Boris Johnson into the Reform UK fold? Get to your calls and texts on that shortly. But with me right now, live on Talk, is Annunziata Rees-Mogg, who is the Director of Comms at the Popular Conservatives. Annunziata, can you give me a quick health check on the Conservative Party? Is there still a pulse?
There is still a pulse. There are still thousands of activists and supporters across the whole country. There will be a conference in a few weeks' time, and we will see how the mood is. I suspect not great. That popular conservatism, we want to make sure the next government can enact the things that need to be done to restore our democracy, our sovereignty, and make Britain a great country again, to get rid of the roadblocks that prevent any party doing that. And that is going to take an agreement from people who are on the same side. Whether that is reform in the Conservatives, one or the other, remains to be seen. A week has been an incredibly long time in politics in the last 7 days. 4 years is immense.
You and Mark Littlewood do a brilliant job running the Popular Conservatives. Is it not time, given the nature of your venerated organisation, which has huge integrity, ideologically and beyond, is it not time for the Popular Conservatives to disown the Tory party, to publicly repudiate the Tory party for net zero zealotry, for the woke takeover of our public institutions, for the illiberal and financially ruinous lockdowns, which were very unconservative, and for the open border experiment under Boris Johnson?
Well, the open borders were entirely started by Tony Blair, and a lot of the legacy does go back to that the constitutional changes he made did hamstring what the Conservatives could do. Are we apologists for what they did decide to do? No, not in the slightest. That we are actually called popular conservatism, that we want to ensure that that side can be heard, and for ministers to enact the policies we need as a country. And that's not just the Conservatives, that is anyone who is elected who is on that side and understands.
But the Tories have betrayed popular conservatism, so why have they not been censured by your good selves?
I think you need the experience, the great people of all parties, that there are even some, believe it or not, in Labour who are saying these things, that the understanding of quite how rotten the state has become, the sclerotic nature of our civil service, the legislation that has hamstrung us, the international treaties that prevent us being a democratic nation, that these things need to be undone, and the best people, the most committed people from all parties need to decide that. The two who are most on this side are the Conservatives and Reform, and we want to take them with us.
Can we flip it the other way? Can we take the view that the Conservatives, who are the most successful political party in the history of Western democracy, who have proven time in, time out their value to this country, whether it was Margaret Thatcher or Winston Churchill, and even, you know, in fleeting moments, David Cameron and others, that actually the Conservatives have done more good than ill in regard to our country's history? I mean, I would particularly mark out Margaret Thatcher and her economic and societal revolution, the beneficiaries of which we remain today. Is there an argument that actually the Tories are being discredited here, they'll get their mojo back, and it's actually Reform who are the charlatans with bag of the fag packet policy making, uncosted promises, and in many cases borderline socialist ideas like scrapping the two-child benefit cap?
Some of their policies are very much to the left, but I think they are believers in democracy and free speech and the essences that underpin what our democracy is. And I think, as I say, it's too early to know who will form the next government. But what I think we do know is that if the next government is prevented by our constitution, by our civil service, by our international agreements, if it's prevented from enacting its manifesto and what the people have elected it for, then our country is in an unbelievably bad situation.
Are you worried, Annunziata, that, and I agree with you on that, are you worried, though, that Nigel Farage is a performer, perhaps Boris Johnson 2.0, a bit of a snake oil salesman who won't cut taxes, who won't stop the boats and won't cut immigration.
I've worked with Nigel. I joined the Brexit Party as a Conservative Party member for 35 years and felt so betrayed by Theresa May that I joined the Brexit Party to get Brexit done. And I think that is one of Boris's legacies, that he wasn't just a snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
He did, I think, reluctantly undertake lockdowns, but that wasn't his natural position. He was very much being pushed into a corner. And actually, if you look at what Labour, the SNP, the left wing were forcing for, it was much harder and longer lockdowns. He resisted as much as he felt able to in a setup that doesn't actually make our Prime Minister a president. We don't have a presidential system. But Boris Johnson failed to deliver in all sorts of ways, and our party threw him out. We're not very tolerant in the Conservatives of leaders who don't deliver what the people want. And I think that's the right attitude to take. Labour, unfortunately, doesn't have it, and we're probably stuck with Starmer for years to come, despite the fact he seems utterly clueless on how to run this country, or even to do the things he seemingly might want to do. Whether Nigel Farage can deliver, I don't know. He has done a phenomenal job over many decades of pushing the agenda, of moving the Overton window, of getting other parties to take up his banners and enact the policies he wants. And what that translates to if he were actually Prime Minister, I'm not yet convinced, but I don't think he would be a failure. You asked earlier if he has the work ethic. He is a phenomenally hard worker. I think his heart is completely in this, and he knows all his reputation, everything he has done in his entire life is on the line as to whether he can deliver.
Indeed, your brother's daughter, your niece Mary, is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, your brother, has revealed that your niece Mary has joined Reform UK. What's your position? Have you revealed your hand as to whether you're now backing Reform? If there were an election tomorrow, have you decided which way you would vote, Annunziata?
I am still a member of the Conservative Party. I have left the Conservative Party once before to join Nigel Farage in the Brexit Party, and I wouldn't ever rule anything out in politics. I think you have to take the situation as you find it. I think the Conservatives still do have a real chance of bringing back some level of trust, of belief and of support. It's theirs to mess up again.
What would a good performance in 4 years' time? What would a good result for the Tories look like in 4 years' time in this brave new world of reform ahead in the polls?
The Tories need to pull back. It seems absolutely extraordinary as a Conservative I'm saying this, but they've got to get back above 20%. That from under that, they do become an irrelevance, and Labour are falling below it as well. That this is an extraordinary time. Britain has got one of the most stable democracies in the world, and right now it's not looking like it. That we were meant to have the grown-ups back in charge, and if anything, we've got more chaos than we've ever seen previously. But the Tories really have to pull that back, and they've got to do that by being Conservatives, by standing for the things that Maggie Thatcher did, for good and for ill, that she had unpopular policies, but people knew why she was doing them. You've got to have the narrative, you've got to have the values-based policies. And is it too late for Kemi to do that? That's an open question. But I think certainly as a party, the values are still there. The supporters on the ground are still committed to a smaller state, freedom of the individual, personal responsibility, Britain with a hopeful future. We've just got to make sure that the politicians in Parliament actually enunciate that and make people understand why it's worth being a Conservative.
Margaret Thatcher wouldn't think much of Nigel Farage, would she? She wouldn't approve of the photo ops and the selfies and the TikTok videos?
I I don't know. I think that there's two sides to Maggie. That there's one video that comes to mind, which is just you can imagine Nigel doing it, where she has a shopping bag in one hand and a shopping bag in the other, and she runs through the very full bag. This would have bought you £1 would have bought you this amount 1 year ago, and under Labour it's now only this amount with a virtually empty shopping bag. And that kind of headline grabbing thing, I mean, that was revolutionary in the 1970s. This is before she won power. But it is exactly the sort of populist headline grabbing move that Nigel does. And in fact, I think they do have their similarities. But does he have the grit? Does he have the support behind him? Does he have the Keith Joseph and the Nigel Lawson to make sure what he wants to happen can happen?
Indeed. Your family are a very high-profile Conservative supporting family, largely. Why don't you, your brother Sir Jacob and other members of the family get behind Reform UK, read the writing on the wall, understand that the Tories are toast and it's all about getting Labour out of office in 4 years' time?
It has all got to be about getting out this disastrous administration that is seemingly hell-bent on ruining our country, that economically we're in a death spiral, immigration is completely...
Thanks to the Tories. Thanks to the Tories, who you should disown.
No, the economy is in a death spiral because of Rachel Reeves. That we were the fastest growing economy in the G7 at the election last year, that the economy had turned a corner completely. And she has undone all of that and put it into reverse, that we are suffering increasingly. And it looks like in her budget in November, she will put that on speed dial and a million times worse, because she's got no way out without cutting spending, which needs to happen in very large numbers, and she's not prepared to do, and her backbenchers won't let her do. But that you can't blame everything on the Tories. The economy as it stands is not one of them. But you need to bring the best people together. And I completely agree with Jacob that we need to unite the right, that actually there is an incredibly good message to sell that the people want, that would be successful, that would make our country great again. But you've got to have both sides together to oppose Labour and get them out to rescue the country. And this division is deeply unhelpful for that, and unfortunately a lot of that comes down to personalities.
Annunziata, a colossal delight having you on the show. Really brilliant to see you again. My viewers and listeners are lapping this up, let me tell you. I do hope that we get to speak again in the near future. My thanks to the Director of Comms at the Popular Conservatism Organisation, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Thanks, Annunziata. Have a great Sunday. Next up, is it time for Prince Harry and King Charles to kiss and make up? Then your calls. Is illegal immigration a price worth paying to sort out the skills gap in this country?
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So is a royal peace deal in the offing, and should King Charles and Prince Harry bury the hatchet and kiss and make up? Well, let's get the views now of Talk's royal commentator Rupert Bell. Hello, Rupert.
Hello, Mark. Good to catch up again.
It's been too long, as it has been for father and son, Charles and Harry. You're a bit of a racing expert as well. What are the odds on the two men meeting this September?
Well, he's here for 4 days, Harry. He's got meetings around the country. Will he be able to fit in some time with his father? That's the million-dollar question. I'm not sure. The problem about trying to kiss and make up, the lack of trust is the problem. But for any father, of course he wants to reconcile with his, in this case, prodigal son, and try and unite and let bygones be bygones. But the problem is also William is the problem as well, who is a long way from wanting a rapprochement with his brother. So therein lies the issue. But I'm sure with the king would love to find a way, and Harry's putting out noises he wants to bring his family here. Well, hasn't he supposedly terrified of the security situation for his family? So there's all sorts of issues, and Meghan doesn't look as if she's desperate to get back on the plane to come here in any shape or form as she plows her business, tries to energize her business career. So from my perspective, I can't see it happening. There may be a telephone call, there may be a way for try and engineer some meetings. Harry's saying, I want to come back more, because what he's actually really saying is, I'm missing the UK, I'm missing my friends, because I think he's a fairly lonely soul in Montecito. While she's getting on and doing her stuff, what's he got going on? Nothing that seems to be new coming out of America. Well, he's now sort of clutching at the Invictus Games, which I thoroughly commend, and what he's trying to do there. He's here for Well Child. He's going to Nottingham to go and revisit an organisation that he's had a long-standing relation with. He sort of almost wants to get back to what he knows best and comfortable doing. And that's the sad thing for him, that he's now a rudderless soul looking for a way forward. And perhaps he's thinking, well, the grass may have looked greener, but certainly it's not, as far as he is concerned, by the vibes that are coming from his camp now.
To the best of your knowledge, Rupert, is King Charles of a forgiving nature?
I think there's a good man there, and of course he would be heartbroken by this, because which father wouldn't? And he's not made of ice and stone cold. Look, you can often accuse the royal family of being pretty, not showing the necessary warmth and affection. But we've seen Charles is a crier. We've seen it at the funerals. You know, there's an emotion there. He understands family. So I think he will be finding this tough, particularly as he continues his recovery from cancer. You know, his own mortality is brought to the centre of stage. And, you know, he would dearly love to find a way of getting back to a more normal relationship with his son. But the trouble is, every time there looks to be, you know, he goes a-bleating and moans about something. Meghan is probably, you know, she's not happy and won't be happy until they all, as he's saying, they've all got to apologise to Meghan. Well, that's not going to be an easy thing to engineer, because I'm pretty sure the family don't think that they are at fault here. So there's a long way to go.
Indeed. Let's hope, Rupert, that it will be many, many years before we see William accede to the throne, because I think King Charles is doing a great job. He hasn't put a foot wrong. He is, of course, an older man, and he is battling cancer, which is being managed, but it's not necessarily in retreat. So at a certain point, William will become king. And is the foideur with the Markles of Montecito going to be a problem for his stint on the throne?
Very good word there, Mark. Not one I've heard too many times on talkTV. But anyway,
I broke out into French. There you go, you see.
Yeah, well, entend cordial. The foideur, as you put it, is ice cold at the moment. And the trust between the brothers. You know, there's the 30, you know, and with talk of Harry now wanting to do, you know, documentaries about his mother and, you know, and sort of warts and all, you know, and not holding back. And you clearly feel that he might have an axe to grind with the establishment and his father there. So there's all sorts of things that he's not, Harry could lead himself to make it even worse situation if it goes ahead. So actually the best thing for Harry to do is shut up and show that you actually mean what you say. But unfortunately, with the Duchess of Montecito, it's not so easy. And therein lies the problem, because Harry, he was loyal to his wife, as he has every right to be, but sometimes that loyalty has got him into serious hot water with the rest of his family.
Well, Rupert, I'm so glad that you and I have had our royal reunion. I look forward to catching up soon. Really good to see you again. Looking in fine fettle, I must say. My thanks to Talk's royal correspondent, the brilliant Rupert Bell. Folks, what do you think? Would you forgive Prince Harry for his crimes of the past? Do you think that father and son should kiss and make up? We'll debate that. But next up, Boris to reform. I'll be taking your calls. See you in 2.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Nigel Farage a political snake oil salesman? Grace is in the capital. Hello, Grace.
Hi. I spoke to Farage on a number of occasions previously when he was presenting elsewhere. And I'm afraid one of the things that stuck out to me was that he didn't seem to be listening. In contrast to something that was said earlier, he said he listens to people. Now, obviously, I'm just one person and I'm incredibly unimportant in myself, but I just got the impression that he's not really taking on board necessarily what I'm saying. I remember in particular an occasion on which he was asking people what they felt about the flag and pride in our flag, and I made the point that I make ad nauseum, apologies that if you've heard me say this before, but our flag is a cross because Jesus died for our sin. And so rather than feeling proud, I want to think about humility and how we're so blessed that he's taken on board the things that Jesus has taken on board things we do wrong, rather than feeling proud. That's just my interpretation, because he was asking for our thoughts about the flag.
Right.
But he didn't listen to what I was saying. Now, I'm not expecting him to listen to what I'm saying, but Rupert Lowe, for instance, who's got very different politics from mine, also essentially made the comment that Farage doesn't really listen all that much to other people. And last weekend, I believe it was, Stephen Cottrell made various comments, and Richard Tice, I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Stephen Cottrell, but I think he was right in what he said last weekend. Richard Tice immediately kind of suggested that they didn't want to listen to what the head of the Church of England was saying, in spite of the fact that they've said we need to get back to Judeo-Christian values, Reform have said. They didn't want to listen to what Stephen Cottrell was saying, and they're obviously not really listening to what economists have said about some of their proposals. So
about the question mark about whether their sums add up and how costed the manifesto would be.
Yeah, and so I'm just not sure how much they do listen. I think that as human beings, we really instinctively want some kind of messianic figure to come in and solve things. And he's very, very good, Farage, at getting people to feel excited and listen to what he's saying and to repeat back to people, to regurgitate what people want to hear. But I'm not sure how much he takes on board the expertise of highly qualified people such as economists or other people who have concerns, including, people who were within his own party before they split off. So I'm not sure how much long-term they would be able to solve problems. He obviously proposed Brexit, and that hasn't really solved the problems he was saying it was going to solve.
Of course, he would argue Brexit poorly executed. But Grace, it's interesting what you had to say. Rupert Lowe, who you just mentioned, former Reform UK MP, has said if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, he will let people down, which is, I suspect, reading between lines, what you're saying. One I want to pick up on the religious side of it and the flag and the St George's Cross. Are you concerned that Reform UK will betray the sort of Christian heritage of this country if they win power? Is that a concern of yours?
Yes. I'm very concerned about that. I mean, in the New Testament, Jesus spends a lot of time arguing with people who kind of have a display of religion, but their hearts aren't really seeking after God. And I feel that a lot of people throughout history, certain monarchs have kind of used religion as a way to get people on side, but aren't necessarily wanting to seek after God. And Jesus taught us various things that aren't always super popular, such as that we should care about people from other places, and I feel like Reform might be using the idea of religion, but not necessarily actually wanting to carry out some of the things that Jesus said. Some of the things that Jesus taught are quite different to some of the things that Farage has said. I do think that Farage makes a good point that our country has some Judeo-Christian values in its heritage, and that the loss of those is a lot of why there are problems in this country. But I think that the loss of those isn't really about people coming from other countries. It's more about the fact that we've gone after, as a nation, we've gone after materialism and greed more and more. I feel like that's at the root of why our country's declining, rather than some people coming from different places, since they make up such a small proportion of the population. I think the elite focusing on their ego and on greed is why things have gotten worse.
Grace, call me again soon. Fascinating call. Herbie in Harrow. Herbie, are Reform UK ready for government?
Of course they are. I don't know if he was at the conference over the last couple of days.
No, I watched it closely. I watched the speeches, but I wasn't there. And my liver is thanking me for that.
Oh, yeah, that is absolutely superb. Your mate Jeremy Carr was there, and
did a great job.
He did a great job, yeah, because he interviewed me a couple of times, because I went down as Sir Keir Starmer, and they loved it. It was a sense of humour. People said Reform is ready to govern. They've had enough of the two-party system. They want the change, and they're going to get change come what may. Believe you me, they really are. It was absolutely bubbling with excitement and enthusiasm. It really was. It really was. And it was most enjoyable.
Well, listen, Herbie, more power to you. Thank you for that. So big thumbs up from Herbie in Harrow on the Reform project. What about those voice notes? A suggestion in the Mail on Sunday today that Nigel Farage may welcome Boris Johnson into the Reform fold. This is Ian. Take it away, Ian.
Hi, Mark. It's Ian from East Grinstead. No way should Johnson be allowed anywhere near Reform. He's an electoral liability now, and the amount of lies he's done has assisted destroying the Conservative Party. Do not bring him anywhere close. I think if he comes close to Reform, Reform will shed voters.
OK, how about Jill?
Morning, Mark. With regard to Boris Johnson joining Reform, no. He's not to be trusted. He brought in the net zero scam, and don't forget, he's got his wife and his father that are still wedded to this ridiculous idea. So no, he should not, under any circumstances, be let into Reform. OK, bye.
OK, what about this then? The illegal immigrants under plans by Sir Keir Starmer in the Telegraph today to be moved to army barracks. Will that solve the problem? Karen?
Morning, Mark. It's Lisa from Canterbury talking about the hotel evictions. He may well put them into barracks, but it's still the same old situation. You know, they're just moving them from one accommodation to the other, but they're still allowed to wander our streets. They are illegal immigrants. They have committed a crime by being in our country. They are being put in accommodation and left to roam the streets, and it's dangerous. It's a national emergency. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. They have absolutely no rights to be here. Thank you.
That was Lisa, by the way, not Karen. Lisa, what a great voice note. Karen, regarding illegal immigration?
Hi, Mark. I'm getting really tired of listening to people like Luke Hildyard. They're fleeing safe countries. They're moving through 16 countries in Europe before they get here. We have had enough. Our girls and women are being attacked. Even men are being sexually assaulted in this country. And I'm sorry, Luke, but the numbers have gone up since they've come in. And I'm getting sick and tired. Oh, but, you know, white people attack women. Yes, they do. We have our own criminals. We don't need any more, Luke. I'm getting sick and tired. These people are coming here because we're offering 4-star hotels. We have people on our streets, Luke, who were born and bred here, that are homeless. How dare you say we've got to take these people in? Charity begins at home. So getting sick of this left rhetoric. Enough.
And so many voice notes have come in today, an unprecedented number. I want to say Jack, Nick, Pete, John and Bill, amazing voice notes. I'm so sorry I didn't have time for you. I'll take a note of your names and make sure that you run in the next show. Last word goes to Paul in Southampton. Paul, what do you think about Boris Johnson joining Reform UK, a partnership with Nigel Farage?
I think it would be an absolute disaster. And I certainly wouldn't vote for Reform at all, ever, if that useless liar came anywhere near Reform. It's just unbelievable that people, and the Dean Doris seems to me to be like a Trojan horse. You know, some of these Tories are scheming for some.